the people that have gone out there against the mainstream media and said, you're going to call us racist, you're going to call us potential Timothy McVeighs, fuck you. War.
Quite sure he's right. Obsession-y neurotic. Pretty dangerous, in fact.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories.
Do you mean you doubt your powers to convince him?
Say it! Say it!
All right, I'll say it.
Worse than that. What I'm afraid of is his power to convince me.
We're talking about putting a manifestly irresponsible man on national television.
Sweetheart, be reasonable.
War.
This is the end game.
I mean, as long as you're reasonable. You have to be reasonable. We have to be reasonable. Thank you very much.
You don't know that I'm going to even do it. You don't know. I may do it. I may not do it. I mean, nobody knows what I'm going to do.
Chris, please explain to the normie we need to finish what we've started.
All right, everybody. It is Tuesday, July 8th, 2025, the 170th day of the Golden Age. I'm your moderator, Chris Paul. Let's be reasonable. I hope you all have had a wonderful past week. Hope you had some good 4th of July celebrating. Maybe saw some fireworks. Maybe ate some burgers. Or if you're John Harold, hot dogs. Hot dogs are good. Don't get me wrong. But you can't do hot dogs unless you've already done a burger. The burger is necessary. The hot dogs are an additional layer of barbecue joy, but you can't make the hot dogs your priority. That's all I'm saying. And I suppose you can. I mean, there are some damn good hot dogs out there. I've had some good hot dogs, but burger guy, what do you want me to say? So I hope you did that. I hope you had some fireworks. I hope you had a nice weekend, maybe an extended weekend. And here we are back at it. I posted yesterday on the Substack to let everybody know, I think I'm going to stick with the Tuesday and Friday schedule as much as I can for these few months going forward, because that allows me to have my Badland shows and this show on the same day. Those are my show days. And then the other days I'm able to focus on writing, and whether that's for the Substack or for the book, that seems like a more valuable expenditure of my time at this point than going through a lot of these issues on here. And, you know, I welcome your feedback on that, but I think that's what it's going to be for the near term. At the end of the month, there will be the end of July, first week of August, I have to be on the road for an event that I have to travel to. So schedules will be changed then. And then toward the middle of August, we have the next Great American Restoration Tour in Deadwood, South Dakota. And so there will be a little bit of a blip in there, but otherwise we're just going to stick with Tuesday and Friday. And I think that that is going to be the proper balance for all interests. This Friday will be a subscriber stream. I'm going to probably do 2 of those a month on Fridays. Then of course they will be replayed on Sunday. They'll be available for everyone at that point. But it's basically going to go like that. I'll do special stuff for subscribers, and then it'll be released later on to everybody else. Okay, so with all of that out of the way, let's get into some interesting things to talk about. And there are plenty of interesting things to talk about over this past week, and I think that they all fit a couple patterns, and they can all be understood in certain framings, and I am going to lay out those framings, and then we'll get into some of the events. And first, I want to begin with something we discussed at considerable length last year over the course of 6 or 7 months leading up to the fake election of 2024. And that is whether or not people wanted to get the hose again. And it seems like people do want to get the hose again. And what I meant when I said that is stuff like we've been seeing. People thought that we were going to be to the end of the project as long as we could get Trump to, quote unquote, win a fake election. And it was a fake election. There was no chance that the outcome would have been any different on the presidential level. They could not have communicated anything differently on the presidential level and had the country go along with it and agree with it and accept it. It was bad enough in 2020 when they did it with Biden, failed. Okay. More people over time disbelieved in Biden's legitimacy. That's all you need to understand to know that the project failed. That erodes confidence in the regime and in the uniparty. It doesn't add to people's confidence in the regime and in the uniparty. And that is the purpose of the narrative op. It's to fortify the regime effort and diminish the anti-regime effort. Okay. And so obviously from the anti-regime side, our effort is to fortify the anti-regime argument and diminish the regime in people's minds. Okay. It's a narrative battle to win the collective consciousness about these issues. Okay. And we can do that quickly if people want to change their minds quickly. And if people are willing to put their egos aside and be humble and admit that they've been wrong about basically all of it. Okay. I mean, I'm writing currently, finally, the long piece that I've intended to write for 3 years called The Joy of Having Been Wrong. And it's about just eventually understanding, okay, I was operating in a false paradigm, which means that anything from that paradigm is probably wrong. I'm going to assume that I'm wrong about everything, take nothing as something that I've learned over time that everybody knows, have confidence in those things, build beliefs upon those things. I'm not going to do any of that. I'm going to assume that every belief that I've ever had might be wrong and then see which ones are able to be built back using only direct evidence, first principles, and sound logic. And it turns out that a lot of your world, a lot of your real world is able to be reconstructed much in the way you saw it before when taking that approach, but by no means all of it. I wouldn't even say most of it. And the part that can't be rebuilt on the basis of direct evidence, first principles, and sound logic, well, that's a false reality. Okay. Because if it was part of an actual reality, it would present itself again in reality. It would be substantiated in reality when looking only at reality and not responding to any of the cultural forces, any of the stories, any of the incentives to repeat the stories. You can just get rid of all of it. And when you get rid of all of it and you take that humble approach, well, then all of a sudden the learning process about everything begins as though you're a child, and some might say as though you're born again. And you begin to realize that the world is not how you thought it was. In fact, it's this other way that is much more understandable and therefore much more fulfilling, satisfying, fortifying. It allows you to move forward confidently because your understanding of reality is now coming into alignment with the reality as it exists. Okay. And that's always going to be better for operating in reality. And so we can try to take the fast path toward that by doing it all at once, admitting, hey, man, I was wrong about all this. I was wrong about the most superficial level stuff. I was wrong about the most fundamental level stuff. Okay. And all that matters is that I understand that none of these things can be taken as a given anymore. And I'm going to have to, about each and every claim, be humble, leave room for mystery and uncertainty. about everything. Okay. And then work your way back. Direct evidence, sound logic, first principles. Okay. If we fail to do that, we are going to, by virtue of this project, insofar as we understand it, we are going to have to go through these repetitive cycles, these reruns after reruns after reruns, rug pulls after rug pulls, because we keep standing on the rug. And we're going to continue to get rugged until we remove all of those beliefs that are based in the false reality. And there are a lot of incentives in the false reality. We talk about this often. Okay. People respond to social incentives. They want credit online. They want credit in their workplace, maybe with their family. Okay. Their friends. You get additional leverage if you're the one that knows what's going on. A lot of people have this sparring with the people close to them in life, where one person is arguing for blatant evil and the other person's arguing against that. Okay. And I understand that in the inversion, they think that we are arguing on behalf of evil. They are never able to make that argument, but they believe that. They tell themselves that. Okay. We should not be in a relationship where the two views are equal. The evil view has become equal to the view that is not evil, the view that reflects reality, the view that is not a lie, like the evil view would necessarily be. Okay. We cannot just act like those things are equal, and we shouldn't engage the conversation as though they are. All right. Someone promoting evil is operating on behalf of the enemy or the adversary, or however you think of it. And it doesn't mean that we try to kill them or try to harm them or anything. It just means that we understand the conversation differently than we've understood it before, which is, oh, you have your opinion, I have mine. I guess we can't settle what the proper opinion is. We can't come to terms and we can't agree. So therefore, we just have to call them both equal. They're not both equal. Okay. We have to be able to get to the right decision on all of these issues, understanding that our prior beliefs about all of these things could be wrong. And so we let them go and we begin to operate in the world in a different way with an open mind, focused on direct evidence, first principles, and sound logic. And where does that get us? Well, it gets us somewhere else. Okay. And if we're unwilling to do that, then we're going to have to be taught these lessons in perpetuity as though we were dogs being classically conditioned. And there's some pretty good indication that that's where we are at this point, because even truthers are unwilling to admit that they don't actually know all the things they pretend to know. All right. And again, that's an epistemological thing. It's not, I've been awake for 20 years. Oh, I've studied that. Okay. All right. If that is your argument for your rightness, you've studied or you've been around for a while, well, it's not going to serve you very well unless you're around really dumb people and other people who operate only in the false reality. Otherwise, you got to come out and solve the epistemological problem, or else you're going to keep getting the hose again. And people are going to keep getting the hose again, and people are getting the hose again. They are upset by what they see on the screen every day, having just insane reactions, hateful reactions. And then they go out online trying to collect social credits and fiat tokens from strangers that might not even represent real people. Okay. That's where we are right now. And everybody just wants to emote. It is a performance. I'm going to have this opinion performatively, and that will let you know that I'm a good person because I have performed properly in response to the stimulus on the television. What I saw on TV made me very mad or very sad or very depressed or very concerned about our future. All of the emotions. Okay. And then we go out and we emote online. What are we doing? This is what it looks like to get the hose again. Okay. We could have taken the approach last year, sticking to first principles, sticking to direct evidence, sticking to sound logic, and understood that elections are fake. And if elections are fake, then the political process is fake. That's not how leaders are put in place. It's not how they are determined. Okay. The winner is determined prior to the election in a negotiated deal by both sides. That's what it is in a world of fake elections, in a world of illegitimate elections, even if you're not willing to go as far as I am on that claim. Then again, if you know an election is not legitimate, then it ceases to be an election. Okay. Because the definition of election requires the weigh-in from the people involved, which means that their weigh-in has to be counted and recorded and processed and affecting the result in a way that is real and legitimate. If you're not able to meet that standard, then the election is fake. Okay. And if the election is fake, that means there are other things going on. There are more powerful forces in operation than your input into these processes. And at that point, we can understand, well, if there are bigger things going on, and this is not dependent on our direct input into the system, then our direct input into the system is actually not required. Okay. What's required is understanding the fakeness, communicating that broadly so that we no longer have fake elections. And you can go down a similar process for almost any issue, but we don't do it. We don't do it. Why don't we do it? Well, because people want to continue receiving social credits and fiat tokens online, and for some people offline, by continuing to support the system as it existed. And there are all sorts of incentives to be collected on our side for doing that, just like there are all sorts of punishments to be meted out on our side for people who do that. Okay? If you go along with the general consensus, the establishment powers, well, then you'll be incentivized. If you go against it, you'll be punished. You'll be censored. You'll be whatever. Okay? At some point, that's just got to be accepted so that we can continue to move on and move forward. Otherwise, it's just the hose again forever. It's just you stand on a rug, it's going to get pulled out from under you forever. And even if we were somehow to get out of that process where we thought, oh, that stuff's not happening anymore, we still would not have broken ourselves out of the circumstance we are in now, which is psyops forever. Okay? And I would like to get out of that. Maybe you would. Maybe there's no way out. Okay? I think that there is. And I think it's directly via Jesus Christ. But, you know, that I know is just such a hokey, like old-fashioned answer. It's also the new fashioned answer, the emergent trendy answer. And it's going to be obviously a trend. You can see the trend forming over time. It's not going to turn around. It's the same direction as it moves in the same direction as everything else. Okay. So we are going that way. But if you can't get out, if it's just two sets of Freemasons psyoping everybody till kingdom come, well, then so be it. And we at least have to navigate those psyops and figure out how to avoid being hoodwinked by them rather than signing up for one side of the psyop, pretending we're not getting hoodwinked and help to hoodwink other people on their behalf. And maybe that's where we are, but I would like to think that we are not there. And I think that it is within our power to move past that, which is what I suggest we do. Now, I also want to talk about the idea of narrative disarmament. And I think that that's maybe the right way to describe this. And I want you to go back and think about how the very deadly pandemic was in 2020. Okay. Horrifying situation, destroyed many people's lives, countless people's lives, hundreds of millions of people around the world, certainly. Millions of people in the United States lost their jobs, lost their homes, fell into depression, anxiety, addiction, domestic abuse. There was spikes in child abuse, in suicides and murders and everything. Okay. It was terrible. It was societally destructive. But at the end of it, we have given up certain misconceptions that we had prior. Misconceptions that because of them, we were able to be manipulated and influenced into doing things that were totally against our interests. Okay. And one of those things I would suggest would be the vaccine regime that has been around in this country for 60 years. Okay. We just believe that there are these awful diseases out there. If we take these scientific, medical, technological products and inject them into our bodies, we're not going to get that scary disease. And that's what it's all about. That's what health is. Injecting yourself with tons of things so that you don't get diseases you're told about by the television. All right. And so the way that the pandemic process evolved and then the vaccine process evolved, again, there's major losses across the board for humanity. I am not denying that at all. But by the end of it, we are now in a position where the vaccine regime can be ended permanently, and where people's fear response to proposed pandemics, proposed by the television, I mean, has been diminished. It's gone away, which means they can't pull that trick again. Okay, that's really important. And I think that we have examples of that over time, right? We just saw a few weeks ago in Israel and Iran that with a story that lasted, I know it was a 12-day war, a story that lasted 10 and a half days, or you could even say one evening, we have moved on from the Iran is going to have nuclear weapons narrative forever. And that is a major chip away at the nuclear weapons narrative broadly. All right. And we see example after example of this sort of thing happening. And I would suggest to you, just this week, people are getting red pilled on multiple things. They're getting red pilled on geoengineering, for one. Okay. And I'm not saying that that is 100% effective across the board. All right. But it is substantial. It's not some little thing that now that's part of the public conversation. And we're getting to that point down a whole range of issues. And I think maybe that's what it takes. If we're not going to take it upon ourselves to let all of this stuff go and really be honest about what we know, what we can know, and what it means, and understand how limited that actually is. You know, the Socratic thing, I know nothing, right? That's what made him the smartest person in all of ancient Greece. He knew that he knew nothing. He left everything with its appropriate amount of uncertainty. And when you do that, you can't use worldly arguments to win against moral arguments, okay? Because you're not allowed to do something immoral in order, you say, to potentially enhance worldly concerns and worldly benefits, okay? It makes the whole process much simpler. You just become humble about what you know, understand that there are uncertainties about everything, and then figure out which worldly act is moral and effective. It has to meet both standards, okay? It can't just be argued that it's effective. Give us another 50 cents per pack tax on cigarettes, and we will solve the homeless problem for you. What? But nobody ever says what. They're like, okay, well, we got to solve that homeless problem. I guess that's the way to do it. It's better than nothing. And so then it happens, okay? That's retarded. But that's the decision-making process in this country, and it has been. And that's what it is when your mind is not awakened, okay? And so these narratives over time have to get disarmed. If we're not willing to take it upon ourselves to let all of this stuff go and build back from nothing, then we're going to need cycle after cycle of these reruns and rug pulls to get us to let go of our grip on whatever part of the false reality we're afraid to let go of. And, you know, it's funny because a lot of people are very dishonest about the things they actually know, which is, again, very limited. And they're unwilling to go back against that because they have created reputations around being the people who know the things that they don't know. All right. If you're saying that you understand the plan, for instance, you don't. Okay. So if you're acting like you do and that you understand how everything is perfectly part of the plan and that everything's in full control, well, you're being a little dishonest. Could it be a different way? Maybe some of them would be like, well, yeah, it could be a different way. I just think it's that. Okay, well, why don't you say that you think it's that and express some uncertainty? Think about what it's like for it to be a different way. Actually live in that belief system and see what it means to believe that thing and whether or not that thing maps onto reality better than the mainstream explanation, which you've accepted, right? We have to be able to do that. Otherwise, we're going to have this process going on forever. Now, I would suggest narratives are getting disarmed as we go along through this process. So a lot of the negative emotional response over the last few days, some of that's gut instinct. I'm not trying to belittle it, right? Some of it's gut instinct about things that happen that are wrong, okay? And we don't want to ignore those things. We want to be able to press forward for truth, all right? But it's not only that, it's also an emotional response. And because of that emotional response, in people who are unwilling to go through the process on their own, that emotional process is going to take them through the steps of allowing these narratives in their own minds to be disarmed. All right. And that's going to be a necessary thing. And it's unfortunate, but at least the emotional impact is being delivered. The cognitive dissonance is being delivered so that the conversation sparks up in public and people actually have to think about these things. All right. And if that's all that's happening here, you can argue about whether or not it's worth it and whether or not it's moral. Maybe all the stuff should be released right out in front and the chips fall where they may, but that doesn't seem to be the pattern. That doesn't seem to be the strategy. Maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong, but it's important to understand the strategy. And if you understand the strategy, if you understand ultimately the awakening, which has to go farther than politics, okay, this all can't be about politics. If it's about politics, then we are just the useful idiots in the partisan scheme to keep us hoodwinked forever. Okay, we are trapped within the controlled opposition dynamic if it's all about electoral politics, especially knowing fake elections. Okay, so it's got to be about more than that, which means we have to go further than just a political understanding to a deeper understanding that creates something lasting within us as individuals and within the collective so that we can continue to push forward. Okay, that has to happen. So whatever leads to that is good and should be followed as quickly as possible, not shut down by gatekeepers, not shut down in favor of worldly concerns. We should be, no matter what the plan is from the top, we should be charging forward in that direction. We have to be charging forward in that direction. Morality demands that we charge forward in that direction. Demanding truth, telling the truth, being honest about what we don't know. Okay? Sticking to direct evidence, first principles, sound logic, understanding the system. Even if we just understand what good and evil are and allow that to guide us, that's sufficient. Okay? We can figure out how to do the worldly things. The real key is no longer being evil. Okay? We have an evil society. We are a fallen race. Okay? That's just what mankind is. We have these worldly, superficial, materialistic concerns, and we often prioritize those over our moral concerns, what we are required to do, the things we are required to do. We place the worldly concerns over the moral concerns, okay? And that is the road to ruin, because then we end up justifying as moral things we know to be immoral or things that we know to be less moral than they should be, okay? And in that, you have the basis for lying. Something you want takes priority over what you should do. That is, again, the road to ruin. We've got to get out of that. And the cognitive dissonance, the catalyst for the emotional response and for that gut instinct that then has to be reckoned with and reconciled, that brings people through the process in a quicker way. So, we've talked on this podcast for years about the creation of chaos and how it is potentially destructive if we are being consistently sold a bill of goods and brainwashed. They create chaos and destabilization, and in the chaos and destabilization, they provide the way out, and it's always to enhance the regime system. How do you undo that? How do you disarm that bomb? How do you reverse the order so that people are able to move away from it? Cognitive dissonance, the emotional response, the cycle of reruns again and again and again, and rug pulls again and again and again. And so I think that's what's happening. And I think we can take heart in that, even if that's not the plan somehow, even if that's not it. It is still an effect, a very clear, visible, discernible effect out in the world that you can witness among people close to you, people who are just acquaintances, and strangers you might meet. You can see that everybody's going through, not everybody, many people are going through that same process that leads eventually down the path where we need it to go. Okay. I wrote this on Truth Social on, I guess, Sunday. And I know Burning Bright and I are going to talk about this evening on Badland Story Hour as we discuss the movie 13 Hours. That's the Benghazi film directed by Michael Bay. But here's this post. A good way to tell if something is fake. If there's an absolutely perfect, though unprovable at every step, explanation for each of the official story's numerous flaws, you should understand that it will proceed to become more obviously fake over time. Explanations that are perfect and totally unprovable are well-conceived lies when they're not wholly fictional. But most of our news is fictional. It's not just that it's fake news, it's that it's not attached to any event in reality prime. It's made up to coerce beliefs and actions when the mind thinks it's being entertained. Its critical faculties shut off. If the official story was true, it wouldn't have had so many flaws in the first place. The official story is never true, which means there will always be flaws found and revisions written to redirect disbelief. Even many years later, additional flaws are found, and then a revision is rewritten to provide retroactive continuity. They say new information was brought to light. And we discussed some of this principle, or in principle, a couple of weeks ago, talking about Edwin Black's the transfer agreement. It's been published in a 7th edition now. And there's an additional 200 pages of the book than there were at the first edition. It has been revised over time. The title has been changed over time to continue reframing what the story was actually about, because the original framing, the original research just served to prove that there was a partnership between Zionists and Nazis to set up Israel. And that wasn't the intended purpose, because Edwin Black is a secular Zionist Jew, as far as I think he describes himself that way. I'm certainly not trying to be unfair. Who has been widely celebrated. Again, many versions of that book have been published, so it's clearly very popular. He's had forwards written by people who headed the ADL. Okay, so it's certainly not anti-Semitic, but it does blow up the entire story about how World War II started and what the purpose of it was. And you can find examples like that over and over again. The point I'm making is that the revisions over time suggest that there are falsehoods in the story. Okay. They have to cover up parts of the story with totally new information to explain away various problems. Someone had forwarded a video the other day about how Anne Frank's diary is fake. And there's been a lot of routes taken to prove that Anne Frank's diary is fake, that the handwriting doesn't match, or that parts of it are literary and not a diary at all, and that it couldn't possibly have been written by Anne Frank as a 15-year-old girl. And there are some other claims made as well. I don't know whether it's real or fake. I assume it's fake. Okay. Anyone should assume it's fake. You should never just give the benefit of the doubt that something like that is real. They made us read that in the State Indoctrination Center that I spent 13 years of my life attending. Okay. I don't assume that the things the State Indoctrination Center taught me are true at this point. Maybe some of them provide some framing. Maybe there are important constructs that allow me to understand other facets of our society, but I don't take any claim from that entire time as definitely true. All right. And so when you go back, you can actually go through the process of, the argument about whether or not the Diary of Anne Frank is real. And for each one of the ways that it is claimed the Diary of Anne Frank is falsified, they have an elaborate explanation that totally wipes that concern away. They're like, no, we've got it. It's this. Totally unprovable, whatever the explanation is. It's not the sort of thing that can be proven, which is kind of its own genius. You make an explanation, a perfect explanation that explains a situation, but no one can prove it. Well, what are you going to do? Take that perfect explanation, or are you going to be a conspiracy theorist? We got a perfect explanation for you right here. And yeah, of course they do, because they've created a fictional scenario. They are not constrained by the bounds of reality in any way whatsoever. They can make up anything they want to sell the narrative. And that's exactly what they do. And to think that there's something else going on besides that is to give the benefit of the doubt to strangers who have a history of lying to us constantly. So why would we ever accept the complicated, perfect explanation that is totally unprovable and wipes away all your concerns? I would suggest that would be a terrible thing to do. Also, think about what it would be like in reverse. And I think that we might have some example of that from the Trump administration throughout the process of these events that I'm going to talk about from the past week. All right. I think that maybe there's some disarmament going on by reversing this very tactic. If you tell a perfect story that makes the questions go away, well, what if you told a terrible story that no one believes and only sparks more questions? Well, that could be really beneficial if you're trying to change people's minds. Okay. You give them just terrible excuses and say, don't talk about this anymore. Here's the terrible excuse why you should ignore the thing you're concerned about. All it does is create more questions. If you understand that dynamic, can you use it in your favor? I would suggest that you can. And I would suggest that we see some of that going on right now. And so to frame the conversation, I think that we can, stick with that and get into it. I am going to check on the chat, see how everybody is doing over on Rumble. I saw a Polymathanon Rumble rant here somewhere, and now I cannot find it. It's yellow. Where is the yellow? Here it is. Polymathanon, $5. Great to be here with so many reasonable people. APL should be jealous. And yes, indeed, she should be jealous. That was very strange. All of a sudden, my mic just went muted. I think that we are okay now. Or at least the machine says it's okay. I don't know if it's actually okay. I'm just hoping that it is. And that's the best I can do. Hello to the Substack people. Hello over on YouTube. I'm just remembering to pull that up right now. There we are. I hope everybody over there as well. Okay, so let's get into some of the business of this past week. And we are going to start with the big, beautiful bill, now known as the One Big Beautiful Bill. It used to be BBB. Now it's OBBB. And some people, I've even seen OBBBA. I don't know what that is. Okay. The Build Back Better initiative and agenda, as we've talked about many times, that was the global great reset agenda, the regime agenda, the uniparty agenda. We have understood that agenda, all its, what we would call wasteful spending, but in truth is spending directed exactly where they want it for exactly the purposes they're attempting to achieve, which is full buy-in into the program and full implementation of the program, facilitated through fiat money printing, money laundering, criminality, the rest of it, okay? Not to take away anything from what that agenda was, but that agenda is one thing. And we've talked about many times hijacking the Great Reset. If you're newer to the show, just go on Rumble, type in hijacking the Great Reset, and you will find a video from me discussing that. And I think that that is pertinent to the discussion. But we have the big, beautiful bill. And then next to that, we have Build Back Better. Okay. Build Back Better would be the regime and uniparty foundational layer of this spending package, of Mike Johnson's package. And in addition to that, added to that, we have the Donald Trump presidency agenda, okay, which includes border security, military spending, and the like. And we are told deficit reduction through a number of different means, et cetera. Okay. And so we have these two things combined into one big, beautiful bill. The Trump stuff is in there and the uniparty stuff is in there. And because of the way we view politics and because of the misunderstandings we have about how the Constitution is supposed to work, about how our government is supposed to work, and how things do actually work, because of that confusion, because of the ways we've been conditioned to react, we want to be sure that we say a blanket no to all of this. We know it's bad. We know that government spending is bad. We know that deficits and debt are bad. And so if we hear that something is going to make the bad thing worse, well, then we know that thing is bad. And we have to oppose it at all costs. We're going to have to get as mad as we need to get online in order to show everybody that we know what the bad thing is, and we would never support the bad thing. And that's basically how the big, beautiful bill discussion went. And part of that was initiated by Elon Musk. And I would suggest it was very crafty. If he is not representing himself authentically, which I don't imagine he is nonetheless serving as a Judas goat for the tech bros, the GOP establishment, all sorts of different demographics on various subjects, all of those demographics still totally asleep, trapped in the normie sphere, trapped in the controlled opposition dynamic, trapped in the Trump derangement, always thinking still that they are smarter than Donald Trump. Those people are just coming out of the woodwork to expose themselves on too many issues to count. Okay. And so let's talk about what I think is happening with the big, beautiful bill. Now, first, and some of this we talked about on Saturday night on Devolution Power Hour. I would recommend that show to everybody. I thought it was a good show. I felt very good about it. And I want to maybe add a little on to that today, but also just put it on my podcast because this is an important subject to talk about. And in 6 months or a year, if someone is listening to old episodes, to entirely miss this critical issue, I think would be an error. So first and foremost, we understand that elections are fake. And if elections are fake, then the people in office have no legitimacy, okay? They do not govern with the consent of the governed. They are not actually able to pass legislation in our name that controls us or takes money from us or any of that, okay? They're not able to do that because they're not legitimately elected and therefore do not hold their offices legitimately. You could even call it treason. Now, Donald Trump has a visible, obvious, overwhelming mandate from the American people. The American people recognize Donald Trump is the president and does, under the Constitution, have the ability to do the things he's doing. Now, I know it's not 100% of the people, okay? It's never going to be 100% of the people, but it's more than enough people to have a backup there, okay? Everybody recognizes that everybody recognizes it, all right? And it doesn't matter if you disagree with it. It's only the recognition. Even the people who hate Donald Trump realize that he's president and that there's a lot of people who want him to be president. They see him go to UFC fights and 20,000 people cheer, okay? Now, maybe every commie out there thinks, well, all those people are stupid redneck fight fans. They're not the real people out there, not like the ones we're protecting. But that's like 5 or 10% of the people. That's like a very elite and detached mindset to have. Okay. Trump draws massive crowds at rallies, etc. He has a mandate. He has the ability to govern. He's also the one out there selling an agenda and being responsive to the people in where to guide that agenda. And he's been that way for 10 years. Okay. And beyond any of that, he's just already president. Okay. He didn't disappear into some forgotten status for 4 years while Joe Biden served as the real president. Joe Biden was a fake and illegitimate president. Trump stepped down for purposes of societal stability, unless he's totally sold out. And I don't think that he is, and I don't think you think he is. Now, we can leave the possibility that he might be because we don't know, but the project's going to advance past Donald Trump regardless at some point. So ultimately, that doesn't matter so long as the project continues to go forward. And the project is not Trump dependent any longer, and it certainly shouldn't be. And we shouldn't make it more Trump dependent. Okay. Donald Trump's a hero, maybe the greatest American who ever lived. All right. But we can't just depend on him forever for our future. And because we can't depend on him forever, we shouldn't depend on him now. All right. So we need to move past that. Regardless, Donald Trump's legitimacy is visible and understandable and discernible from direct evidence, first principles, and sound logic. Donald Trump's mandate from the people is not violating any of those. We can see that most people understand Trump has the ability to govern. Now, you might say the same thing about the Congress generally, but if you inquire about any individual, no one has any reason to substantiate that or back that up. None of these people have a mandate. All right. And this was very visible. Last week, I was listening to Chip Roy on War Room, and I didn't bother pulling the clip because it's not interesting enough to pull. But Chip Roy basically made the case that he couldn't vote for XYZ measures within the big, beautiful bill. He was going to have to vote against it unless these things got changed. And it doesn't look like they are going to get changed. So I guess I'm going to have to vote against it. And he made the argument to Steve Bannon that he was actually implementing Trump's agenda, the agenda Trump ran on. Chip Roy was making himself more MAGA than Trump, more Trump than Trump. This is Trump's agenda. I am going to protect that agenda as described by voting against what he wants me to do. Made no sense at all. And of course it didn't make any sense. Okay. And so I talked about this scenario a little bit on Saturday night, and it's a tough one. Okay. I get it that this is going to be a difficult one for people to get totally on board with. Okay. So if you understand that elections are fake and that the Congress and Senate are illegitimate, then they don't actually have the ability to pass legislation. They do have the ability to perform the passage of legislation. And I would suggest that's what they're doing. Okay. Donald Trump, as president, as the primary protector of the Constitution and the constitutional order, would be violating his own constitutional duty to sign legislation created by an illegitimate government. Okay. And so I would suggest to you, he's not actually doing that. Now, we have, again, the Build Back Better and the big beautiful bill smushed together into one thing. What can we do about that? We don't want the Build Back Better agenda, but we do want Trump to be able to do all the things that he needs to do. And we have to have the resources to be able to do things. So we have to go to Congress to get those resources. And if we couldn't go to Congress to get the resources, then none of the things would happen, except they would happen, just like the legislation was going to pass. You can't know it before because I don't know the plan. But it becomes clear after the fact that there was no point at which that bill wasn't going to pass. Trump's talked about it for a very long time. This important piece of legislation. And then we have the Freedom Caucus voting against it and voting for it and voting against it and voting for it. Oh, yes, they're so principled. Now, maybe they're all just acting and playing along and doing exactly what we need them to do on behalf of Donald Trump, on behalf of the American people. I don't see any reason why we should bias toward that understanding when we're talking about people like Chip Roy, who didn't object to the certification of electors in January of 2021. People like Thomas Massey, same thing. People who supported Ron DeSantis, like both of them. Okay, these people have been on the wrong side of countless important issues. And you can chalk them all up as kayfabe and psyops, but then you got to admit some other things that go along with that. Like all of it is completely fake and it's only a show. And in that case, you're A, being hoodwinked, and B, your emotional reactions are completely unjustified. Okay. You're basically just watching a soap opera and crying throughout your day. All right. You are the soap opera addict. Whatever. I don't think that there's an internet meme of that, but in the original usage of the word meme as an idea that travels broadly, what people understand about the soap opera addict is probably a lonely woman at home on her couch with a box of tissues, watching her stories every day for years on end. Okay. And that's what people are doing with the politics. If they are simultaneously understanding that it's a show, that it's under full control, and then also having emotional reactions. I don't really get it. But anyhow, so they don't have any ability to pass this legislation, but Trump needs the resources. All of this, I would suggest to you, was baked into the cake, regardless of the process in the Congress and the Senate. And when you understand that, then you understand the process in the Congress and the Senate as a show to push the uniparty agenda, and so that the explanation of what's going on still fits neatly within the normie sphere's framing inside the controlled opposition dynamic. Republicans versus Democrats figuring out how they can agree to pass legislation. And it hurts these special interests, and it violates these principles. It's all silly. Okay. None of it's relevant. The government is not legitimate. All right. But let us continue on Build Back Better / the big, beautiful bill and get into what all this is originally about. And there's a series of video clips here. A couple of them we have seen on this show before, or perhaps just this one. This is the Senator Patty Murray.
Not have a line item veto, much less a retroactive line item veto. Your notion of this pocket rescission defies common sense and, by the way, the plain text of the law. Director Vogt, will you commit to this committee that you will not attempt to do an end run around Congress with this so-called pocket rescission, something members on both sides of this dais have made clear is outright illegal?
Senator, there's a lot of mischaracterizations into my previous comments. I would just say that we believe that we have, under the law, numerous options with regard to how to achieve savings, including rescissions that are timed at the end of the fiscal year. General Accounting Office has articulated that earlier in the life of the Impoundment Control Act.
This should be a yes or no, and what I hear you is all kinds of word salad to make sure that you are letting us know that you intend to do things that are outside the intent of the law. And it has also been reported that you are considering sending Congress a massive deferral package under the ICA in an attempt to run out the clock and avoid legal scrutiny of this administration's illegal freeze before ultimately impounding the funds at the end of the fiscal year.
So she is talking about the Impoundment Control Act. That's the ICA. That was Patty Murray, the senator, attempting to get Russ Vogt to commit to not using any, what she called, end around in order to shut down this funding. And Russ Vogt did not fall in that trap. He did not admit it. He said exactly what they intended to do. They believe they have a lot of options under the law to be able to limit spending, including rescissions, including impoundment. And we can also discuss along with that the line item veto. Okay. This is, I pulled this up the other day to go through impoundment, rescission, and the line item veto. Okay. So let me see. This is all ChatGPT. Impoundment is when the president refuses to spend money that Congress has appropriated. Rescission is a formal request by the president to cancel specific budget items after they've been appropriated by Congress. And those are obviously very similar, except in this one, the president is requesting that Congress remove and cancel specific budget items. And the line item veto allows the president to strike out specific provisions, typically spending items, from a bill after signing it into law, rather than vetoing the entire bill. And for that one, I should have read the legal statuses here, okay? But impoundment, the legal status, it was used by many presidents, especially Nixon, but curtailed by the Impoundment Control Act of 1974, which requires the president to spend appropriated funds unless Congress agrees to rescind them. Rescission was allowed under the ICA, but Congress must approve the rescission, okay? And they're saying it's not unilateral. We shall see. The line item veto was declared unconstitutional in 1998 by the Supreme Court in Clinton versus the City of New York. The court ruled it violated the presentment clause of the Constitution by allowing the president to amend laws unilaterally. And that is not what that allows the president to do. The president can also veto anything. So unless the Congress and the Senate have that veto-proof majority where they can send it back to him after he has vetoed it, then the president can shut down any legislation until he gets his way on that legislation, okay? And so that is an effective line item veto. If you say, I will not sign this unless you get rid of that, and you just wait, well, then they have to get rid of it or you don't sign it. And if they get rid of it, then you sign it. Okay, what did you do? Well, you got rid of that line, okay? That's the most obvious thing ever. If the president can veto the whole thing, of course he can veto any part of it. That's the only sensible way for it to operate. And so, of course, in 1998, in what was probably a friendly lawsuit between the Clinton administration and the city of New York, they got a liberal court to decide the opposite of what the founders obviously intended, okay? Based on some worldly arguments about how this would work better. Nonsense, okay? The Supreme Court is only supposed to decide on the basis of the Constitution and preserve, most importantly, the separation of powers. And they didn't do that. And this ensures that that is not done. Now, you'll remember that Russ Vogt also discussed this back in the fall of 2024 on the Tucker Carlson podcast. And here is that clip. This is about 3 minutes long.
To bring back the notion of impoundment. And this is something that...
Of what?
Of impoundment. The ability to not spend money. For 200 years, presidents had the ability to not spend a congressional appropriation. That has always been the constitutional system. It had been brought, it had been a paradigm that had been brought from the UK and how we understood. The constitutional principle is certainly power of the purse means that Congress gets to set the ceiling. You can't spend without a congressional appropriation, but you weren't ever meant to be forced to spend it, and it has become a floor. So 200 years, presidents are using impoundment. They get money for something. The president says, I don't think it's a good idea, or I certainly can do it better, or I have events that are happening overseas that cause me not to want to spend on the gunboat when I want to get some treaty done. All manner of executive decision-making that would be a part of that. In the 1970s, at the lowest moment of the presidency, Congress steps in, and to some extent the courts, and they passed the Impoundment Control Act, which was really the Impoundment Elimination Act. And from that moment, they had destroyed separation of powers on spending and on fiscal issues. But it was beyond that. It wasn't just about dollars and cents. It was about control of the bureaucracy.
So that law effectively meant the executive branch, the president's agencies, have to spend every dollar they're sent by the Congress.
Correct. And I believe, as a budget guy, that was the original sin on why we can't do anything fiscally from that moment on. It's also why we get omnibus bills, because if I only need you to get your signature and I lose all of my ability to, throughout the rest of the fiscal year, to push and pull and not spend and make different decisions, I just got to get your one signature. So I'm going to put everything in that one bill,
right,
thousands of pages, and I'm going to push it through at the hardest time for you politically. You might have some diplomatic visit that you're going on.
Yeah, totally.
And so impoundment is vitally important, not just to save the country fiscally. It is vitally important to be able to wrest control of the bureaucracy, because when you combine Congress giving the agencies vast authority to interpret the laws that they passed, overly broad, make law essentially that has no repercussions on the people who voted it, right? They don't have to vote on what the right blend is for ethanol.
That's right.
And then you say that your funding is going for Congress, and the president has no ability. Sorry, Mr. President, you don't have to that's illegal. You can't turn off my funding. Now Imperial Congress still exists, just a lot more subtle. So that's number 2, bringing back impoundment.
So that's impoundment. That has to come back. That is part of the preservation of the constitutional order, because what we have instead is the Congress using the power of the purse, which is rightly theirs, according to the Constitution, to put in place funding for these federal agencies that are quote unquote independent and get to do whatever it is they're assigned by Congress to do in whatever way they choose, because Congress has delegated them that power to make rules and regulations, to prosecute people, to try them in their own private courts. All of that Congress did. They gave them the money. And with the Impoundment Control Act, they said presidents do not have the ability to affect any of this. These agencies are independent. The president, though he is the plenary authority of the executive branch, cannot tell the agencies in the executive branch what to do. Okay? So clearly, that cannot be part of the constitutional order. You can't set up independent agencies under the executive branch that are immune from executive influence. Okay. And it's not just immune from executive influence, it's that they are allowed to act in ways that are contradictory to what the plenary authority of the executive branch wants to do with the executive branch. They can violate and work against a president's agenda. That's subversion. And we're supposed to believe that that is a constitutionally allowable situation that preserves checks and balances and the separation of powers. The president's own executive branch is used as a check against the presidential power, and we're told that that is the right way it should be. Okay? That's not the right way it should be. This is a necessary fight to have, and I think that that is the ultimate purpose of the Build Back Better, big, beautiful bill going through this process as we have witnessed it. because now we have what Congress has allotted to be spent by the executive branch, and then we have the president choosing whether or not to spend what has been budgeted. It's not a requirement that it all gets spent. It's that this is the maximally allowable expenditures for all of these different things. And so the president, of course, can just say, no, sorry, I think we're going to close that agency down. No, I don't want this agency doing the things that they were doing in the fake and illegitimate Biden term, or what they were doing, in the Obama administration 15 years ago, or whatever it might be. Okay. The president does not have to just allow the executive branch to function outside of his control, right? He's the plenary authority. There's nobody else that can violate the president's agenda in the executive branch, or that person should be removed immediately. And of course, the founders understood this. You cannot shift the separation of powers and the checks and balances and expect the system to continue working. It only works in the way it's designed. And we're going to talk about some more aspects of that in a little bit. But let's continue with the rescissions. Actually, first, I saw some business to take care of in the Rumble chat. It's Tony Man has become a monthly supporter and sent a $5 rant. Just realized that I am not subscribed here. How dare you? Truly one of my favorite places for broken down news and, of course, APF. And in addition to that, Smoke says, keep doing what you're doing, brother. And I will keep doing it. Although in obviously different ways, as I outlined earlier. Okay, so let's continue here, because I think that we can see pretty clearly that this is the design of this program. All right, this is why they did it. Here is Steve Bannon.
Some, I think, commitments made on the executive order side about getting control of spending. As you know, we've been a big believer in impoundments. I think you're going to see rescissions, maybe pocket rescissions. The appropriations process, remember September 30th, the fiscal year ends. This whole appropriation process for fiscal 26 is where the rubber meets the road, and you're going to see another big fight because people are adamant we got to get the cost down here. And President Trump understands that. I think Russ Vought understands it. Russ Vought's come up with a series, I think, of potential, at least partial solutions. This is why the big, beautiful bill, what you're seeing today, and going to be voted on, and you got to embrace this, is the Senate bill. It's not the House bill. Nothing will be changed that came over from the Senate. Otherwise, it would have to go back and forth. There's a decision made. We're not going to do that because it could take forever. Decision was made about some, not changes, but actions that are going to be taken. I think you'll see these out of President Trump, the White House, Russ Vought, the Office of Management and Budget, to get tougher on cost cutting. So that will come out, I think, later.
So Steve Bannon talking about rescissions, pocket rescissions, and all of the approaches. They are all available to the Trump administration, and it sounds like they're going to pursue it in one way or another, or perhaps all of the ways. And when they do that, they will be welcoming court challenges. Why? Because the courts are not operating properly in accordance with the Constitution. And the hope is at least that the Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito wing of the Supreme Court will win the day on these issues. And I would suggest it's very likely that they do. I don't know how John Roberts or Amy Coney Barrett would be able to decide against the president's ability to limit spending and functionality of executive branch agencies. I just cannot see that happening. I know Neil Gorsuch wouldn't do it because I've read his book. Can't imagine Brett Kavanaugh does it. Now, again, Supreme Court might be totally illegitimate. It might only be a narrative layer for getting the public to understand these things. But the public is about to have the arguments on all of these issues that they've never confronted before. And so this narrative, the brainwashing that has been a product of it over the years, and all the manipulations of our politics that have happened as a result, all of that is going to crumble down. Okay. And again, we've seen that pattern so many times now, we have to expect it's going to be successful here. We are being told that's what's going to play out. And the truth is, we've been told it for a while. By the way, this is Ralph Norman, Congressman Ralph Norman, commenting about the rescissions as well.
Increase. What I don't understand is you had a view that was negative about this bill yesterday. Is there something different about the bill today?
Yeah, it is. We met with President Trump, and you know, he did a masterful job of laying out how we could improve it, how he could use, as his chief executive office, use things to make the bill better.
So there's going to be there are big distinctions between. I guess what I'm trying to understand is the bill that was sent from the Senate back to you is fundamentally different from yesterday to today, because then the Senate would have to.
Different. No, it's we accepted the bill as is. What's different is President Trump is going to use his powers to, like on the subsidies, to make sure that a lot of these subsidies won't remain in effect, you know, from here on out. And
so we have another example. This is now clearly thought through prior to the passage of this bill, that the rescission thing is going to happen, and they're going to welcome the court challenge. All of it needs to be settled. All right. We need to get some society-wide understanding of how these things are supposed to work. And that's what we can be assured of throughout this process. People will argue about it when the president begins to use rescission, use impoundment, use a line item veto. I don't think we're going to have that method in particular, although maybe at some point, okay, all these things do have to get settled. Trump would welcome the fight on all of them. I would expect, therefore, that we are going to see the fight. I mean, I can't imagine the enemy's just going to give up any territory, as little territory as they possibly can, but they are ultimately going to lose this territory. The more they try to defend it, the more likely that will be. Now, I said this has been hinted at for a long time. John Harold found this. This is back from Trump's Agenda 47, and he goes through it here.
For 200 years under our system of government, it was undisputed that the president had the constitutional power to stop unnecessary spending through what is known as impoundment. Very simply, this meant that if Congress provided more funding than was needed to run the government, the president could refuse to waste the extra funds and instead return the money to the general treasury and maybe even lower your taxes. Thomas Jefferson famously used this power, as did many other presidents, until it was wrongfully curtailed by the Impoundment Control Act of 1974. Not a very good act. This disaster of a law is clearly unconstitutional, a blatant violation of the separation of powers. When I return to the White House, I will do everything I can to challenge the Impoundment Control Act in court, and if necessary, get Congress to overturn it. We will overturn it. Reasserting the president's historic impoundment authority will also restore critical negotiating leverage with Congress to keep spending under control. Very simple. We're going to keep spending under control. This is the only way we will ever return a balanced budget. Impoundment. Just as importantly, bringing back impoundment will give us a crucial tool with which to obliterate the deep state, drain the swamp, and starve the warmongers, these people that want wars all over the place. With impoundment, we can simply choke off the money. This policy is anti-inflation, anti-swamp, anti-globalist, and it's pro-growth, pro-taxpayer, pro-American, and pro-freedom. I alone can get that done. I'll get it done, and I'll make America great again. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your attention to this matter. I mean, he lays it all out right there. Okay. And something I didn't mention was the leverage that he's talking about. This gives him leverage in his negotiations with the Congress. If they put a bunch of stuff in the bill that is violative of his agenda, that he doesn't want in there, that he's not going to allow the country to spend, he can say, well, if you leave it in there, I'm just going to strike it out anyway. So take that out of the legislation, and then he's got something that he can give and take with. And, Trump wants as many of those leverage points as possible because he is the deal maker. He laid it all out there. He said, we welcome the court challenges. He made every argument in that 2-minute video. And we are seeing all of that play out in front of our eyes. Okay. So are we going to be upset about the passage of the big, beautiful bill so that we can show other people that we know debt and deficits are bad and prove ourselves to be fiscal conservatives? Because it's very important, very important. The establishment in the Republican Party loves to talk about how fiscally conservative it is. And so they can scream and yell about debt and deficits as though any of it's real or any of it matters. And they do that to burnish their quote unquote conservative bona fides. But it doesn't actually burnish their conservative bona fides because the debt and the deficit don't matter. They're fiat money. The elections are fake. So all the money that is spent is odious debt. It's mathematically impossible to repay. And the war is against the global regime and the central bankers behind it being fought over the fiat currency, currently branded as the American dollar. So the $37 trillion or whatever it is meaningless. Okay. Now we're going to see all sorts of narrative explanations for why that debt goes away. And, the Trump card is going to be part of it, and et cetera. All good. But at the end of the day, we're not just going to continue adding on to that debt because there's no one to pay it back to. All right. They created it from nothing. And when they are defeated, we don't then owe them money. Okay. So I'm not saying that no interests are going to be taken care of as this process unfolds, but there's going to be a winding down. All right. It's not just that all of the spending policies are going to stretch out to infinity. I'm not saying that they're all going to be cut off immediately, but many of them will be. And we can look forward to more of them. So in response to the big, beautiful bill, Elon Musk, the former best friend of the POTUS, the BF POTUS, I think we can abbreviate Elon Musk to. Well, Elon got really upset and he thought maybe I should start my own party. He was mad as hell about the debt and the deficits, and he chose just not to take it anymore. Thanks for standing up for the American people, Elon Musk, the South African. He says on July 4th, Independence Day is the perfect time to ask if you want independence from the two-party, some would say uniparty, system. Should we create the America Party? Yes was nearly a 2/3 to 1/3 winner over no, with about 1.25 million votes cast. Now, did 1.25 million people vote? Well, no, there's no evidence of that whatsoever. Just a delivery of those numbers on the basis of somewhere around 1.25 million votes. Okay. They could have all been bot accounts. We don't know that it even adds the number correctly. All right. It's entirely possible that you can set the outcome for a poll on Twitter and no one would ever be any the wiser. Right? It is no different than the fake news polls. People think, oh, this is all real people. This is how the crowd's really reacting. Okay, well, it might be, but it probably isn't. And there's no reason to believe that it is. All right. There's no reason to bias toward believing that those 1.25 million votes represent real people. And we know for certain that they don't all represent Americans. Now, there were articles out there, claims made, and maybe they're true claims. I haven't dug to find out, but that a lot of the votes were coming in from India. That wouldn't surprise me at all. Okay. But then again, we're just talking about internet activity that can be routed through anywhere. So it doesn't really matter. And none of it's verifiable in any way. There's no indication whatsoever that those are real Americans expressing their opinions about this issue. Okay. Now, regardless of whether or not we want to break the uniparty system, which we do, we don't need any extra political parties. There should not be any political parties to begin with. Here is Elon Musk's follow-up post. He said, by a factor of 2 to 1, you want a new political party and you shall have it. When it comes to bankrupting our country with waste and graft, we live in a one-party system, not a democracy. Today, the America Party is formed to give you back your freedom. Now, democracy with a small d might preclude a one-party system. Not entirely certain that's true, but fine. We do have a one-party system. We are not in a democracy. We should not pretend that we are. We are also not in a constitutional republic. We just have a standard communist administrative state. And we all worship the state because the American public is filled with statists. We have abandoned God as the authority. We have replaced God with the state. We have taken away the godly. We have replaced it with the worldly. That's going to get it wrong every time. Okay. That's where we actually are. He talks about the waste and graft. Well, it was his job supposedly to find all of that during Doge. We were told that he found all sorts of waste and fraud and graft and abuse. Did he really find that much? Well, he certainly publicized a lot of the waste, fraud, abuse, and graft that was known about prior to his arrival. He might have done certain things with our databases, our informational systems within the federal government. Maybe he did excellent work right down the line and his team was perfect. This is not about whether or not Elon Musk is a good guy or a bad guy. Okay. Russ Vought is now Doge. So that's good. He's going to cut the spending. Maybe Elon implemented systems that would allow him to do that more effectively. And if that's the case, so be it. But Elon Musk at this point right now cannot be credited for having reduced waste, fraud, abuse, and graft within the federal government. All right. We talked about these story layers for months in advance of Trump's inauguration. From the election to the inauguration, we talked about the fantasy team. We talked about the TV characters. We talked about what they might do, what was already planned to be done before Trump was even in the picture. Okay. We know about the broader global agendas, and we can understand how the system might operate to protect itself, how the uniparty might protect itself, even with a Trump administration, and that they would hope to outlast that administration, ride out the 4 years, and then redirect toward the agenda as it was before. And so there are plenty of places that the natural MAGA agenda, the Trump agenda, aligns with various aspects of that global agenda. And so it's very difficult sometimes to tell one side from the other. We can't always know which direction something's going. We just have to recognize that both plans are in place, riding along at the same time. All right. So Elon Musk suggests a new party. He wants to call it the America Party. He then goes on X, formerly Twitter, to say, oh, darn, that was the same post. We don't need that. Where? I don't know if I pulled it. I pulled the wrong one. The long and short of it is he said, you asked for the American Party or the America Party, and you shall have it. And he started this new party, or so we are led to believe. The filings are unverified, we are told, listing the Tesla CFO as the treasurer of the new Musk political party. So he launches the America Party. We are told that a filing was made to the Federal Election Commission, an organization that shouldn't exist, okay? Just shouldn't exist. This is a problem with how our elections are run and how they have been mangled and inverted in purpose and intent from the original founding, which we'll get into in a second. But this is just another federal agency that should not exist. So filing political party paperwork with them is pretty absurd. But I guess we're still going down this path, and maybe we'll just keep getting the hose again and again and again, and we'll go through the 2026 midterms, getting the hose again and again and again. People cannot let go of the idea that elections are somehow important, even though they are fake, and that we should devote our entire lives to them, even 16 months in advance. All of that is unmitigated retardation. Okay. We need to move beyond all of that stuff. Okay. So I don't care if this filing is real or if it's fake, but it's unverified. The point is, when the story was told to people, the key takeaway was that Elon Musk's treasurer for the political party would be his Tesla CFO, Vahab Taneja, who is apparently an Indian man. He's listed as treasurer and custodian of records for Elon Musk's newly created political party, according to two separate unverified filings on the Federal Election Commission's website. And we have, over the last couple of years, seen filings on the FEC's website that people then later disputed. This is a normal thing, okay? So we can't just take it for granted that this party has actually been formed, although we are told within the central narrative that it has been formed and that it's being run by Indians. It's by Indians, for Indians. I don't know how true that is, okay? We're just going to have to see. I don't expect the political party thing to actually garner any support unless Trump declares that he is leaving the Republican Party and intending to join the America Party, and suggests that all of his MAGA supporters join the American Party. Or if they just do it naturally, following Trump along in that regard. Could it happen that way? Sure. Okay. But again, the proper number of political parties is 0. There should not be political parties. It is not good to support the Republican Party on the basis that it is not the Democrat Party. And this is the only way that we can defeat the Democrat Party. Okay. That is not a good reason to support the system as it should not exist. Right? We didn't need political parties at the beginning. Political parties are not a necessity. They should be done away with completely. Right? They exist to create a controlled opposition dynamic. It is the same system that they have in England, in the UK, right? Our former colonial masters, who we declared our independence from, well, then we took on the same form of government. You have a House of Lords, which is the Senate. You have a House of Commons, which is the House of Representatives, the Congress. You have the chief magistrate, prime minister in their system, or the monarch, maybe a combination of the two things, a political and sole governmental leader in an executive sense. And then you have the courts. Okay. It's not that much different. We have the same form of government, and we bring this same form of government everywhere. In every regime colony, in every regime proxy state, the same form of government. Well, why is that? Well, it's because it's the regime's form of government, right? It's not confusing, okay? And they present the controlled opposition so that they can keep the entire spectrum of political positions that could ever be enacted in reality, or so we're told, within the controlled opposition dynamic, within the safe space for the global regime. Okay. Nothing on offer from our political parties in this two-party system, which is really a uniparty system. And we call it a two-party system, even though there are other irrelevant third parties. Okay. Those third parties are just used as narrative devices to explain why a candidate who was obviously going to win didn't win. Oh, this third party candidate came in and siphoned off some of that candidate's support. Therefore, the candidate that everybody knew was going to win and that everybody wanted to win, they just didn't win. The third party spoiler, at it again. All right. So we have what we're told is a two-party system, but has more parties. It's really just a uniparty system. We live in a one-party communist administrative state. All right. That's not what we were supposed to live in. We can still aspire to our American ideals. We can reclaim our birthright. Right. We can enforce that original Constitution if everyone agrees to do it. All of those things are possible. There's no reason to be upset about it. But it turns out that we are in a one-party communist administrative state where the government and the corporations work in accordance in public-private partnerships right in front of our faces. And we're told when they do that it is stakeholder capitalism. Because for some reason we believe that capitalism is the be all and end all, and that it implies free markets. Free markets are the be all and end all, and capitalism is a characteristic of free markets. The free markets are the important thing, not the claims toward capitalism, okay? Because capitalism, as we can see, can be completely hijacked and inverted, and that is what they have done. And we are just sold the idea that we are operating under capitalism, but that's not true. There might be some operation of capitalist competition in the sub-elite levels of society, but when you pass a certain level, that doesn't exist at all. It's only top-down control from there, top-down control over everything, okay? So at the top, looking down, it's just a communist administrative state, a one-party administrative state. That's all it is. And we can pretend that at our lower level that we are all in competition. And in some sense, we really are in competition because we want to have more than our neighbors. We need to outcompete our neighbors to get the little that we do have. Okay. That's the rat race aspect of all this. But anyhow, this is not going to break the uniparty system. And more political parties will never break the uniparty system. More political parties are unnecessary. No political parties should exist. The way that we originally elected presidents was that we would elect within our state congressmen that would represent us. I think it was 30,000 at a time. Now it's 750,000. All right. Many of those, by the way, are illegal aliens that still get their own representation, more representation than we get in many cases, because our reputation is supposed to be our representation. Our vote is supposed to equal 1 for 1 American. And every time an illegal alien is added in, that 1 per 1 gets diminished. It is now less than 1 per American for every additional illegal alien that is entered into that process. Okay. So it's already messed up at that point. But we are supposed to elect our congressional representatives that go to Washington, and then they each cast their 1 electoral vote for the man they want to be president. And they cast that vote twice, right? 1 for president, 1 for vice president. Doesn't matter the order. The most votes are president. The second most votes are vice president. There are no parties. There are no tickets. And it's good that there aren't tickets so that multiple points of view can be represented, and that an heir apparent isn't installed through the vice presidency. All right. We would have different outcomes if that were the case. And so, of course, they got rid of it because that would make it so that if we had legitimate elections in that scenario, then it would be impossible, virtually impossible, unless all the representatives, the majority of the representatives were totally corrupted somewhere in the process and unaccountable to the people at home, which would, theoretically not be possible if there were real elections and an informed populace, right? They would have to go represent the interests of their people at home, and those interests would then be reflected in the selection of a president. And so you can know that there would be vast majority approval within all of the states electing that president. And then you have the vice president in the same way. And at no point do you ever need political parties. Political parties allow the controlled opposition to succeed and nothing else. All right. The proper number of political parties is 0. We should go back to constitutional elections. If we're going to have elections at all, they should be like that rather than this popular vote nonsense. Okay. The popular vote numbers we know to be falsified. So why would we care about the popular vote? It was never supposed to work that way. Senators were also never supposed to be directly elected. And that would make a huge difference in our society right now as well. Okay. They could just be appointed. They are supposed to be representatives of the aristocracy. And people might be offended by that, but the aristocracy is always going to have some say. They're always going to have some control. More ambitious people, more talented people, more diligent people, people who have passed down generational wealth, which I believe people should be able to do. Okay. You want to build up something that you can leave for your children, and then they build up something that they can leave for their children. And that's how society goes on. All right. All of those things require to some degree the existence of an aristocracy. And the aristocracy will then have some input into what happens in the country. And they should have that input. And maybe they should even have outsized input. Okay. And so you set up the Senate selected by the aristocracy. Well, these people are going to represent us. And then the Congress that's represented totally by the people, the Democratic branch. Okay. And that's how it was described in founding documents, in the Federalist Papers, Anti-Federalist Papers. All right. That's the Democratic branch. That's the representation of the people. So the people would have to agree with the aristocrats to do legislation that is only within the bounds of the Constitution. And then they would send that legislation to the president, who was a function of the Democratic body, the Democratic branch of the government. Okay. And that president would then sign off on the legislation constitutional that the Congress and the Senate have agreed to. If the legislation was unconstitutional, then it's the president's constitutional duty not to sign it, not to go along with any part of it. Okay. And we should expect to see Donald Trump doing those things. All right. Okay. Let's go on. Let's move on from Elon. Let me take just a moment here to check on the chats and whatnot. Beth has become a monthly supporter. Thank you, Beth. And as always, thank you for all of your help with the Telegram feed. Where are we now? Okay. Checking. We are good. Okay, let's continue. So, sticking with the tech world for just a moment. Elon Musk, he's, the avatar of the tech world, and maybe the Judas goat of the tech world. He's going to bring out all those people, all the tech oligarchs, all the conserva bros on the podcasts, the GOP establishment, Con Inc. media, all of it. They love Elon Musk. They think that saying they don't like the Republican Party and the Democrat Party is the best thing, is the best, most virtuous thing they can say about the political situation. It allows them not to take any responsibility for any of it. The uniparty is not the focus. If the uniparty was the focus, people would understand what the uniparty's agenda actually is and what it represents and what effect it's had on our society. They don't really get there. They just support Elon. So is he walking everybody off a cliff? I would say, yeah, maybe he is, intentionally or not. Maybe his assignment is to be the Judas goat for all of these people. He's going to lead them to their demise. They're going to pile on with Elon, thinking that he's the way out. He's not only aligned with all the important things of Trump, he's got none of the bad aspects. He's going to be able to lead us forward. They did the same thing with Ron DeSantis. They've attempted to do the same thing with JD Vance, and obviously that's never going to work for either of them, and it's not going to work for Elon either. Is he leading the tech community off a cliff? He may well be. Okay. So some TikTok news. And I know that people might think we spend too much time on the TikTok news over the years, but I think that this is crucially important in a data and information sense, although I don't know that to be true. I believe it to be true. And I think that this is an example of something that was largely settled out in 2020 and then hidden in the background, put on the back burner. And now we're going to have the public understanding of what has actually happened. That process will begin. And I think we can see that process beginning. This is Business Insider from July 1st. TikTok employees brace for more organizational and personnel changes. The changes would impact workers in the company's global e-commerce business, TikTok Shop, which has had several rounds of layoffs this year. Over the past month, we have assessed how we can best support our evolving global e-commerce business in alignment with our mission and evolving goals in the market, the company wrote in the memo. These changes come from careful analysis of how to create more efficient operating models for the team's long-term growth. So the organization is changing. They write, TikTok's U.S. e-commerce team has been under scrutiny from leadership at its parent company ByteDance this year. And that is interesting because the entire point is that TikTok is meant to be divested from ByteDance. There are some claims that already happened in 2020 and that their data was put aside separate from ByteDance, housed in Oracle facilities by Larry Ellison, who we'll get back to in a bit. The division's top executive told staff in a February all-hands call that the country failed to meet its performance goals in 2024. The division has faced new obstacles in 2025 after Trump hiked tariffs on China, where many of TikTok's global sellers are based. Weekly U.S. order volume fell in mid-May compared to mid-April after tariffs went into effect, BI previously reported. And we're going to come back to China and to tariffs later on, assuming we can get there from a time-oriented perspective. This is Ars Technica from July 2nd. TikTok is being flooded with racist AI videos generated by Google's Veo 3. The release of Google's Veo 3 video generator in May represented a disconcerting leap in AI video quality. While many of the viral AI videos we've seen are harmless fun, the model's pixel-perfect output can also be used for nefarious purposes. On TikTok, which may or may not be banned in the coming months, users have noticed a surplus of racist AI videos courtesy of Google's Veo 3. Now you might see there, I have highlighted this sentence. According to a report from Media Matters, numerous TikTok accounts have started posting AI-generated videos that use racist and anti-Semitic tropes in recent weeks. Most of the AI vitriol is aimed at Black people, depicting them as the usual suspects in crimes, absent parents, and monkeys with an affinity for watermelon. The content also targets immigrants and Jewish people. The videos top out at 8 seconds and bear the Veo watermark, confirming they came from Google's leading AI model. Now, I don't think racist content is like mean-spirited racist content is good. I do think that racist content is sometimes hilarious when it's kind of well-intentioned or in the process of exposing critical things that we've been lied to and brainwashed about. And there are many of those when it comes to race. And I don't think that it is controversial to say that, considering that all of us witnessed massive, widespread anti-white movements online. All right. White men in particular, then white women, then white gays, and it just went down the list. It's not Jewish people who represent and look as white. It's just whites. Right. So there's been a considerable anti-white movement in this country, supported by mass media, supported by global regime and uniparty funding. Okay. Supported by censorship and various forms of propaganda, including from the biggest content producers in all the land, the movie and television studios and the mainstream media. All right. So all that's existed, and that was never any problem. But you go after blacks, you go after immigrants, you go after Jews, well, then it's just totally off limits, even if it's really funny, even if it's important. And hey, man, you want to make fun of whites? Go ahead. You want to make fun of Italians? Go ahead. I don't care. All right. Doesn't affect me at all. And that's how things are supposed to be for adults. Okay. Unless the insult, unless the slur, unless whatever it is something that I feel I represent, you can simply ignore it. Just water off a duck's back, right? Who cares? I don't care. Say whatever you want. It's not going to hurt me. I don't identify with the comments. So how's it going to hurt me? Why is it going to upset me? I certainly wouldn't let it run my life. And I certainly wouldn't support government forcing people to not say things, right? Which is the First Amendment. Not that we care about that anymore in this society, of course. And I say that as a person who is a top 1% of the 1% in terms of targets of censorship, right? So, yeah, all of that is entirely within bounds. But the critical thing here is Media Matters, because Media Matters did that exact same number a few years ago about Twitter. And that's why Elon Musk has actually sued Media Matters, and who knows where that's going to go. And again, some of that is dependent on what Elon's ultimate status is. Okay. Maybe that's just a friendly lawsuit to hype up both sides of that story, and then eventually it'll go away. We don't know. But Media Matters has gone about this before because they want to get the app shut down, and they want to get the AI content or whatever content in the past censored, right? Talking about all this racist content, putting pressure on TikTok. They've got multiple angles of attack here, and they're going to use all of them to divert the plan. Will it work? No, of course not. It never works. It really just never works, which is a good reason not to worry about so much of it, because we do a lot of worrying that is probably unnecessary. So this is Reuters from just yesterday. TikTok building new version of app ahead of expected U.S. sale. The Information reports. And I guess the Information is some kind of media outlet. So TikTok is building a new version of the app ahead of a planned sale of the app to a group of investors. Who are the investors? I would suggest that it's just going to go into DJT, Trump's media group, formerly TMTG. And I have suggested that now for years. So I still think that that is on track. We shall see. This comes as U.S. President Donald Trump said on Friday he will start talking to China on Monday or Tuesday about a possible TikTok deal. He said the United States pretty much has a deal on the sale of the TikTok short video app. TikTok has developed a plan to launch the new app to U.S. app stores on September 5th. The report said, so that is less than 60 days from now. Last month, Trump extended to September 17th a deadline for China-based ByteDance to divest the U.S. assets of TikTok. The report added that TikTok users will eventually have to download the new app to be able to continue using the service, although the existing app will work until March of next year, though the timeline could change. Okay? All of that is very interesting. And now we have something more of a timeline on when this issue will be settled out. I think that that will be a significant moment in the media and information space. Maybe a crucial and decisive moment. Okay. Maybe that is when the parallel system begins to come into its full bloom. And you got to wonder if it's going under DJT. Well, under that umbrella, you also have the Rumble Cloud and Rumble. You have Truth Social. You have crypto ventures. There's a lot under that umbrella. Okay. And maybe it's just a place to park these things temporarily. We will see. I will propose when we talk about Larry Ellison, something else I think that might be going on that I began to think about this morning. So again, I could be totally wrong here. But my dog is getting excited about something outside, and eventually he will run his way out of earshot. Let's listen to Donald Trump address the TikTok business.
Pretty much have a deal. Now we're going to go and ask. I think we're going to start Monday or Tuesday asking, talking to China, perhaps President Xi or one of his representatives. But we pretty much have a deal on TikTok. But we think we probably have to get it approved by China. Not definitely, but probably.
How confident are you that China will agree to that deal?
I'm not confident, but I think so. President Xi and I have a great relationship, and I think it's good for them. I think the deal is good for China, and it's good for us. And for us, it's money. You know, we make a lot of money if the deal goes through.
Are you planning to meet with President Xi? Are you planning to go to China?
Well, I was asked to go there. Yeah, he asked me if I'd go, and he would likewise come here. We get along very well. We always have gotten along well.
We always have gotten along well. That is Trump talking about Xi. He expresses that he doesn't really know if China needs to approve the deal, or it's also possible that they approved it 5 years ago, and so they definitely don't need to approve it now. A situation that played out 5 years ago that we were told didn't play out that way at all 4 or 5 years. If it plays out that way again, if we revert to that original form, which is what is happening, then what happened during the 5 years? Did anything change? No. Well, that means that the thing actually happened 5 years ago then. And I think that that is what we will see. Let's come back to Elon for a second. I should have mentioned this earlier. And it's funny because I went out of order on this on Saturday as well, forgetting to mention this part. Elon Musk also went in terms of his publicity for this new political party he says he's forming. He also ended up last week following Curtis Yarvin, who is one of the guys credited with the creation of the Dark Enlightenment movement. It's a philosophical movement, the neo-reactionary movement. It is also sometimes called. It's Curtis Yarvin and Nick Land. Nick Land I love. Curtis Yarvin I do not love. I've described it a great many times on this podcast. He is the philosopher king of people like Peter Thiel and J.D. Vance, and now he is in the Elon Musk circle, apparently. Elon also followed Andrew Yang, the man who used to go on the Intellectual Dark Web podcasts and talk about the universal basic income. Throughout 2023 and 2024, he talked about starting his own political party called the Forward Party. So Elon Musk into his party is attracting all of these people somehow. Okay. There was a picture last week. I think that I probably deleted it. I wonder if I can quickly find it. Here it is. Actually, perfect. Let's look at this picture that someone put together. I think it was Bad Hombre over on X, formerly Twitter. That's not it at all. Double clicked while I turned. That was just a map of Israel and Palestine. And it's a very interesting map, but not what we are talking about right now. Okay, so this is obviously a joke. Obviously a joke. Bad Hombre over on Twitter, Joma_GC. Mark Cuban there, Thomas Massey, Rand Paul, Andrew Yang, Tom Tillis, one of the Krasensteins, Mario Knopfel, the woman who claims to be an Elon Musk baby mama who used to be at the Babylon Bee, and Ian Miles Chong. That's going to be Elon Musk's new political party. Well, he definitely has Andrew Yang in there. And in terms of the tech oligarchs who are all into Yarvin, and they want that tech libertarianism in these disparate city-states with their totalitarian governments that are subscription services for the oligarchs establishing those city-states. Okay. And for everyone who wants to live there, you basically pay your taxes as a subscription to the government and to the land it occupies. That's what the Yarvin picture looks like. That's very similar to the sovereign individual picture that was proposed back in 1999 and supported by people, again, like Peter Thiel. So it seems like Elon is creating this party in the direction of that bad side that was Trump aligned. Okay. The side pursuing the Build Back Better agenda, the global regime agenda, so long as they can have their libertarian utopia as part of that. Okay. So the fact that he is going in that direction and that he's being followed in that direction by all of these people should give some indication as to what these people's motivations for aligning with Trump at any point were. Okay. Now, I'm not claiming that Andrew Yang or Mark Cuban, of course, have aligned with Donald Trump, but many of the people following Elon Musk into this ridiculous third party venture are people who have aligned with Trump at various points. Speaking of Yarvin, Nick Land posted this last week on X, formerly Twitter, and this just warmed my heart. If you are familiar with my position on Yarvin, and you've heard me talk about him, which I've done in extended form a few times now, I think that one of Yarvin's major problems is that he believes the counter narrative, the official counter narrative of history is true and real and represents something that really happened and can be abided by in order to understand our world as it exists now. And so he ends up with World War II as like the most formative and informative issue in his work. And he's wrong about it, which makes all of the analysis founded on that misunderstanding worthless. Okay. It means that he reaches tons of terrible conclusions because he's starting with terrible premises. And so Nick Land said the other day, non-EHC America got the most important thing right. Secular history is fake. Even Moldbug got lost on this. Now, Moldbug that he's referring to is Mencius Moldbug, aka Curtis Yarvin. That was the name that he blogged under before just reverting to his real name, Curtis Yarvin. So Nick Land is saying Curtis Yarvin is wrong about secular history and its fakeness. Nick Land recognizes that fakeness. That fakeness is a crucial recognition. We cannot align any of our beliefs with reality if those beliefs are founded on false histories from the false reality, right? It's just going to be impossible, okay? At least if we are ascribing to the positions presented in those false histories, and that is what Curtis Yarvin does. Now, non-EHC, that means effective human control, okay? Like the people who think that they are going to preserve the system as it exists, all right? An easier way to think of it would be normies. Those are not perfect definitions of what Nick Land is getting at. You can look up EHC, effective human control, Nick Land on any AI and get a longer explanation of what he's getting at there. But that is essentially the takeaway here. There is a set of people who've understood that this secular history, this false history, is the fake news of a former time. Okay. And that's all we need to know. We have no problem ignoring fake news now when we see it playing on CNN or Fox News, when we see it on The Atlantic or the New York Times. We're like, oh, that's fake news. Well, how is it so impossible for us to spot fake news in history books using the same methods? And I would suggest that it is not impossible in the least. In fact, it's quite easy because they just repeat the same stories over and over and over again. And if you understand the story in full right now, you can just pattern match it to stories from the past, layering on each character where it belongs in each event, where it belongs, and you'll understand exactly what's going on. January 6th is no different than the Reichstag fire. Okay. It's no different than Maidan in Ukraine in 2014. You can just match the patterns, match the characters, understand exactly what's going on, and understand the story that the regime is telling. And when the former story, revised countless times for as long as the history has existed, from using World War II as an example, from the 1930s to now, okay, it's been revised countless times. Mentioned the example of Edwin Black's The Transfer Agreement earlier. So it's been revised over and over and over and over and over again to obscure what the story really was, what the reality really was, and what it all means. And so then when it comes up again, we don't recognize it as the same thing. In fact, they tell us everything they need to tell us to understand that it's actually the opposite of what it really was. And that just works out again and again and again. And so I think that your Curtis Yarvin falls victim to that over and over. And it is negating much of his work. He's an entertaining writer. He's insightful about some things, but you can't get that wrong. Okay. And he does get it spectacularly wrong. And I'm glad that Nick Land pointed that out. That makes me feel less alone in these things. Okay. Let us continue. All right. So, man, I think we're going to do okay. I don't know that we're going to get through all of it, but we're going to do okay. So this was the tragedy porn of the past 5 days. And I'm not saying that to make light of it. Okay. But that is how this story has been relayed to the public and how it has evolved. CNN has had this story on its front page for days. It no longer has it as the number one story on their website, but it's still right there, just left of the number one story, Greg Abbott and his input into the situation in Kerrville. So I don't need to give you the backstory on the flooding event that took place. There was significant rain in Kerrville, which is west of Austin and kind of northeast of San Antonio, a relatively small town. Significant rain all across Texas since Thursday. And that rain is said to have caused a flash flood in the middle of the night, Thursday into Friday, Friday being the 4th, and that it wiped out homes and campgrounds and trailers and the rest of it, and created a situation where a lot of people went missing and many were killed. Many of those people who went missing, we are told, are young girls from Camp Mystic. Okay. Now, this is the New York Post on Friday. Christian summer camp, where girls went missing during devastating flooding, has been attended by daughters of Texas's political elite for 100 years. Now, Steve Bannon has been covering this story pretty extensively on War Room over the past week, and did so for most of his show on Saturday. He had Ben Bergquam there basically immediately, and he was present for the public events that they would have, where the officials would give the official story about what was happening, how many people were missing, the numbers, the details, what the response efforts were. We know how these press conferences go. Bergquam got the first question at that press conference, which is very interesting. Where's the rest of the media? Ben Bergquam from Real America's Voice, who often goes on the War Room, is like the first guy to get a question in the press conference. Kind of interesting. Same situation was true in East Palestine, Ohio. And to some degree, the same situation was true in Lahaina. And I would recognize all of these events as similar, at least in that way, in the presentation of these stories to the public, and to some extent, the ignoring of these stories by the mainstream media, or at least ignoring them in aspects understood to be important by people who are not addicted to the central narrative and not subject to the whims of the normie sphere and the incentive and punishment structure of the party of false decorum. So we have this camp where the daughters of Texas's elite go traditionally for summer camp and have been going for decades upon decades. That is already incredibly suspicious when you hear a story like this, and it's directly involved with a place where elites would send their young girls. All right. There are elements upon elements of this story that are creepy. I don't know if the creepiness is necessarily justified, but it's at least worth exploring. Okay. And when you begin to question these things, and the other questions about this event involve weather manipulation, and we'll get to some of that in just a second. We've talked about weather manipulation on this show a bunch of times. I've done, I think I titled a show, Very Natural Disasters, where I go into this at some length. We assume that when a natural disaster takes place, that there is nothing we can do about it, nothing more to understand about it. It is just an act of God, not an act of man, and therefore no one could be held accountable. None of it could have happened for any purpose. It's just something that happened in the world, and we have to deal with it and respond to it as best we can. And so between those two elements, there are ample grounds for questioning on this story. Okay. We can understand the tragedy. We can feel sympathy for the families, and we can still question the story and how it's being presented and communicated to us, because the ways it's being presented and communicated scream bullshit, as they do in prior scenarios. Okay. And people are saying, or people will say, well, isn't that offensive to these young girls? If you think it is, okay. But imagine someone close to you was murdered. Okay. Just murdered, not an act of God killed them, but actually murdered. You knew that the official story was attributing the murder to the wrong person. You would never at that point be discouraging other people from investigating, right? The only way to be sensitive to the relatives, the families of the victims, would be to question the authorities in the official story. And instead, it's presented to us as insensitive to do that because it somehow disgraces the memory of the people affected by it. I think the opposite is true. I think the failure to question these things is what allows them to happen again. And there is nothing that is more disgracing of the families of the victims and the victims themselves than accepting false stories about what's happened. Because the false stories, the acceptance of those false stories, makes a fix impossible. And if a fix is impossible, how can we do anything but a disservice to the victims? Okay. So it's important to question these things. It doesn't mean that we have to create elaborate conspiracy theories and then tell other people that's what definitely happened. Okay. We don't have to ignore real world evidence, which I had people sending me on Saturday, evidence of flooding and some devastation and wreckage. Not a complete picture. I would never say it's a complete picture. Okay. You got to take them with a grain of salt. It's information among other information. There's nothing conclusive about that information. It's information among other information. The information itself does not tell a full story. Pictures of ruined buildings in the rain does not tell a full story. Security camera footage from a camera posted on a bridge over a rushing river does not tell a full story. We don't even know that the video is real. Okay. Because as we just went through, the AI is pretty spot on at this point. It's certainly spot on enough to create realistic news footage, particularly when they put all the filters on it to make it look like the video was taken in 1984. somehow when we have hostage videos from war events and stuff, the footage always looks like that. Why? Isn't that weird? But so anyway, none of it's conclusive. It's all information among other information. We don't let it form the whole story, but at the same time, we don't discard it. Okay. And so we have to be able to juggle all these balls in terms of priorities, right? They all have to stay in the air. It's all got to be controlled. We need to be able to question what's going on with that camp and what elite influence and motivations might have been involved. We need to talk about the weather manipulation. We need to understand that this was a tragic event for some people, and we want to do right by those people. Okay. Still got to question the things. And that's not all we have to question. Okay. Because there's a lot of money being flooded into Kerrville. Okay. And what happens in very natural disasters? Well, there's a lot of wreckage. A lot of people can't go back to their homes. There's nothing to go back to. And so they'll take whatever pittance of a payoff they can get and try to start their life again somewhere else. Well, what happens to that land where all the devastation and all the havoc was wreaked? Then it's just sold to the highest bidder for all sorts of developmental purposes. So if you have a landowner and a building owner, a property owner in some location, and you want to get them out of there because you have these big projects to align with the regime agenda, the uniparty agenda, and the moneyed interests, if you need that land, well, what's the best way to get rid of it? Well, if we have a natural disaster, we can claim insurance money on it. We can move these property owners off the land, and then we can have that land. And then we can begin our construction project. And there's tons of money flowing into Kerrville. Okay. You can, again, research that relatively quickly online. In fact, you know what? I'll just pull this up and we can go through it really quickly. Let's take me just a second. Apologies here. Shouldn't be too hard. Okay. So I began looking to see whether there was any indication that the operation of dams could have somehow caused the river to overflow. And I was not able to substantiate that, though there are many dams on that river upstream and downstream from Kerrville. There's no way to directly evidence that that was any causative factor in the flooding event. And so we can leave that aside for right now. Doesn't mean it's impossible. We just don't have anything to substantiate it with. So we can leave that aside, but let's go to some of the interests in Kerrville. 2050 comprehensive and downtown plans and Lake Nimitz plans, or Nimitz Lake plans. We have EIC and KEDC infrastructure and industry investment. That's $5 million flowing into Kerrville. A concrete factory opened a $40 million sustainable building materials plant, creating 40 direct and 180 indirect jobs. Killdeer Mountain Manufacturing set up an aerospace related operation in 2021, generating a bunch of jobs. Lennar Homes is developing 620 homes in Kerrville with infrastructure support incentives up to $27 million to combat a housing shortfall of 2,000 to 2,500 units. A housing shortfall. Well, what does that mean? Sounds like they've imported a lot of people and need places to put them. We went through this in the 2024 Supreme Court cycle with this case out of Oregon. It could have been 2023, but I think 2024. So the housing shortfalls are an interesting problem in a state that has millions of illegal aliens like Texas does. Okay. We also have some minor projects here. And then finally, the Kerrville Public Utility Board approved construction of a 122 megawatt natural gas power plant budgeted at around $160 to $183 million set for operation by mid-2027. Now, can I claim that any of these projects are to be done on land affected by this flooding event? No, I cannot. Although I assume, just based on what that would require, that it could be done. I have not done it myself, so I can't state a direct connection there, but that's a hell of a lot of money flowing into a pretty small place, right? Those are massive projects. And with money and interest like that, a lot of influence is possible. Now, does that cause someone to wash away 28 young girls? I'm not claiming that, okay? I'm claiming that there are a number of interests that might have certain intents, and then sometimes things go wrong. Or the things that go wrong provide the perfect shield in a narrative sense to be able to get to the deeper layers, all right? We are encouraged not to go to those deeper layers out of sensitivity for the victims. Well, who are the victims broadly? The class of victims is the class of people vulnerable to the regime's projects, all right? That's a lot of people, and we are among those people. So we have a vested interest into making sure things like this don't continue to happen to the extent they can be prevented. And we are told that they can be prevented by the other side as they attempt to blame Donald Trump for all these things, okay? He slashed funding to NOAA and the National Weather Service, so therefore they didn't have the warnings in time, and that's why no one could escape. And now all of those deaths are on Donald Trump? Okay, really? I mean, that's kind of extreme, is it not? Sorry, I thought I glitched out there for a second. Just had an issue with my monitor. But we can see that there is an immediate reversion to politics and to their political interests, and they immediately go after Trump and blame him. So they are attempting to hold someone personally accountable for this natural disaster and the tragic fallout from the natural disaster. Well, what if the accountability was actually on their side? Okay, because it's clearly not on Donald Trump's. All right. So it is absolutely worth looking, and it is entirely within the bounds of, within moral bounds, to be looking. Okay. It would be a dereliction of duty insofar as we have a duty to these people. And I would believe that we do, just like we would want people to try to get the culprits of something that affected us directly. Okay. I think we have a duty to do that. It's a necessity that we do that. And it's weird that we have truthers out there saying, well, you know, not everything is a function of these same forces. Like, let's just focus on these poor girls. Okay. Well, you are defending at that point the global regime in full. And I don't know how anybody can justify that at this late stage in the game. This is the other aspect. And this is a pretty good Substack. I'm not familiar with this person. Her name is Celia Farber. And you can find the Substack at Celia Farber, Celia with a C, .substack.com. The headline from Sunday: cloud seeding company Rainmaker, founded by 25-year-old Thiel fellow Augustus Dorico, was seeding in Texas flood areas 2 days before flood. Quote unquote, stewarding the natural world. Right now, this article is a little long. I'm not going to go through all of it. Some of this is work that Celia Farber has compiled. Okay. And it is not directly her writing, just to be clear about that for the people who are probably only listening to this and not seeing it on their screen. So this is a summary that she did not write. Augustus Dorico is a 25-year-old UC Berkeley dropout and Thiel fellow, that's Peter Thiel, who founded Rainmaker to combat water scarcity through cloud seeding with a long-term vision of terraforming deserts. His background includes early entrepreneurial ventures, a pivot from water management software to weather modification, and a deep Christian faith that informs his mission. Peter Thiel tells us that he has the same thing. Politically, he appears to lean toward anti-regulatory, pro-innovation, and anti-degrowth views with a pragmatic engagement with policymakers. While not explicitly aligned with a political party, his associations and rhetoric suggest sympathies with libertarian or conservative-leaning tech communities. His focus remains on technological solutions and practical outcomes rather than ideological crusades. So he is a Thiel underling, tech libertarian who positions himself as somehow right-leaning, but here he is in a picture shaking hands with Bill Clinton. And you can see that he is basically doing the Palmer Luckey thing, the mullet haircut, the unsheveled look, or disheveled look, sorry. Shaking hands with Bill Clinton. Let's keep going down. I want to find this Thiel stuff again. Okay. Here is another bit of biographical information about Dorico. Born around 1999 or 2000, he was 24 in 2024, if you caught all that. I guess they don't know his exact birthday somehow. He grew up with an interest in physics and the existential question of God's existence. He enrolled at the University of California, Berkeley, to study physics and data science, but dropped out one class short of a degree to pursue entrepreneurial ventures. Who drops out one class short? His decision to leave academia was influenced by his belief that real-world opportunities outweighed the value of traditional education, a view reinforced by his acceptance into the Thiel Fellowship, a program by Peter Thiel that awards $100,000 to young entrepreneurs who skip or leave college to build startups. This is legitimately a scene from the HBO show Silicon Valley. And hold for processing a moment. I want to see if I can actually find this. Let me see if I can. Silicon Valley Dropout. Here we go. This is it. This show, Silicon Valley on HBO, if you've never seen it, it is the greatest possible takedown and satire of, or parody of, the tech oligarchy that you could possibly imagine, by the creator of Beavis and Butthead, Mike Judge, who also did the movie Idiocracy. Here is the scene to which I was referring. The character is Peter Gregory, and the clip is called Peter Gregory Hates College. I suppose I should just leave this on normal speed. There we go.
Hey, do you hear what Peter Gregory is doing?
You mean buying that island in the Pacific?
No, he's building one, actually. It's baller. Anyway, he's also offering $100K to people willing to skip or drop out of college to pursue their idea. I don't know what happened to that guy, but he really hates college. Anyway, he's doing a TED Talks in Palo Alto tonight. Should we try to get in?
I dropped out of college. Maybe I should re-enroll and drop out again. Try and get the money.
So, just to be clear, that is exactly the same. And the guy's name is Peter. Just saying. Let's keep going.
Gates, Ellison, Jobs, Dell, all dropped out of college. Silicon Valley is the cradle of innovation because of dropouts. College has become a cruel, expensive joke on the poor and the middle class.
You are a dangerous man, spewing ignorance.
I don't think so.
The true value of a college education is intangible.
The true value of snake oil is intangible as well.
Fascist.
Hi, excuse me, Mr. Gregory. I have an idea I'd love to pitch you if you have time.
Oh.
Well, that is before I just give up and go back to college.
Do not do that. Go work at Burger King. Go into the woods and forage for nuts and berries. Do not go back to college. I think I have been played. Fine. Go ahead and pitch. You have until I fasten the seatbelt in my car.
Thank you so much. A Pied Piper is a proprietary site that lets you find out if your music is infringing.
His car then pulls up. It's one of those one-seater little electric cars. That show's amazing. I mean, it really is hilarious. But there you go. Exactly the same as Peter Thiel. Let's go back to the Substack from Celia Farber. Okay. Dorico's entrepreneurial career began with a less glamorous start, selling toilet products on Amazon while still a student, alongside his friend Hao Li. I guess that is an Italian name there. Yeah, that's Chinese. This venture, provided early business experience. He is described as charismatic, with a mullet and a casual demeanor, often emphasizing vibes in his interactions. He has quite a history of tweets talking about his love for making weather different than it was. Let me see if I can find this. I meant to grab one more picture here. Darn it. This could be very difficult, but I think that I will get there as long as we are successfully holding for processing. All of our wildest dreams can come true. Okay. So here we have it. This is Beth sent this to me today. Thank you, Beth. She is great at scouring X, formerly Twitter, as I am not on there. Let's focus not on the tweet itself, but on these screenshots. Some random account says, if cloud seeding is so successful, why are we turning to dust down here in Texas? This was from late March of this year. Dorico responds, we're just getting started, Texas, trying to help as fast as we can. He also, in response to a tweet from May 14th, 2023, said, brother, I'm going to put Zeus and Thor to shame and flood the earth in a manner befitting of a disciple of the God of Noah. Okay. It's pretty bold. He also says, you got to work so hard. This is, again, in late March of this year. You got to work so hard that haters accuse you of being a deep state psyop. And so this says, August Dorico, the Rainmaker, $6.3 million seed round in 2024 with notable investors. The 1517 fund, Peter Thiel aligned, Champion Hill Ventures, a defense-focused venture capital fund, Tamarack Global, Starship Ventures, Day One Ventures, Balaji Srinivasan, who is a very serious intellectual on Twitter. I remember him most particularly for his promotion of red, yellow, and green zones for COVID. Your phones would track for contact tracing, and it would let you know if you were in a green zone, a yellow zone, or a red zone. So you would know, never go to the red zones. A major element of the technocratic dystopia, and he was a massive proponent of that to save us from a disease that did not actually exist. Gary Tan, and it notes as well that Augustus Dorico was a recipient of that Thiel Foundation scholarship. Really is incredible, isn't it? Now, again, just to be clear, I don't have any direct way to prove that Rainmaker was the cause of that flooding event. It just so happens that they were doing cloud seeding in that area 2 days prior. What are you supposed to say about it? Did they do it on purpose to cause the tragedy, Or was the tragedy a result through purely accidental means of that weather manipulation? If weather can be manipulated like that, and the ionosphere can be manipulated with HAARP, why should we expect that they're not being manipulated? Can they cause very natural disasters? Remember, we had that really strange hurricane that was meant to hit Southern California back in 2023. That was when I did the very natural disasters. In fact, there was going to be a hurricane hitting California and a hurricane hitting Florida at exactly the same time, giving you the Ron DeSantis, hey, Trump fans, look at Ron DeSantis, he's a hero. And opposite that, we get the Gavin Newsom presentation. Did that thwart the pro DeSantis narrative? Because you might remember that Ron DeSantis's info op, the DeSantis simps, they went bananas about that hurricane in the lead up to the hurricane. Then they overstated what the hurricane actually did, then called Ron DeSantis a hero after that hurricane. Let me see if I have my old Ron DeSantis meme from that hurricane. Oh, it would be so great. Damn it. Well, it was that famous picture of the big tree in front of the governor's mansion being broke in half. And then Ron DeSantis in his high boots touring the wreckage. Ron DeSantis in those boots, man. Ruined with the boots. All right, so let's continue with Peter Thiel. And I don't want to go too deeply into this because some of it is unknown to some extent. We've spent a lot of time on Peter Thiel. I wrote an article about how weird and creepy he is last week. I hope you saw that on Substack. I think that is a worthwhile read. And so I hope you'll check that out if you haven't done it already. And by all means, share this stuff, right? The only way to enhance the size of the audience is to share it naturally, okay? Because I'm not going to be out there doing self-promotion. I hate attention farming. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to go on those legacy media platforms. So it's got to happen the old-fashioned way. It's got to happen naturally and by word of mouth. So please, by all means, share that stuff when you can. Actually, let's take a brief pause here for a second because I've totally forgotten to get these Rumble ads in, and I don't want to fail to do that. So let's take a break for 1775 coffee. Actually, a coffee break sounds kind of good right now. With the 1775 starter kit, you're getting a bold dark roast that hits harder than a CNN fact check, the smooth medium roast, and the Vitality mushroom coffee for clean energy and laser focus. No crash. All the 1775 coffee is single origin, small batch, toxin free, and mold free. And in addition to that, when you order the starter kit, you get a gold spoon clip, a frother, and a black 1775 tumbler. $170 worth of coffee and gear, yours for $99. This is for all of the people who have been supporting Rumble and watching 1775 coffee blow up on Rumble and wondering if it's actually worth it. It is. Go to 1775coffee.com/studio and grab your starter kit before they're gone. Bold beans, clean fuel, and a morning routine that stands for something, just like Rumble does. Start your day with coffee that actually backs what you believe. Okay, let's get back to Peter Thiel, and I'm going to go again to Substack. This is a man named Jonathan Chiorin. It's postscript 1794.substack.com. Okay, the title of the article is the most shocking Me Too scandal in Silicon Valley history about to explode in Thiel world. He says, and I'm just going to give this for the background. For a while now, I've been internally debating how to broach this topic given its nature. There's no two ways about it. It's lurid and horrifying and chilling. And it also happens to fall under the heading category of things I've heard about and not things I can prove. So he's very honest right there from the beginning. Part of me wanted to ignore it in favor of other more intellectual topics, and those topics are still the main focus of this Substack in general. However, I feel compelled to discuss this topic at least once. The thing about this particular rumor is just how frequently I have heard it over the years, various iterations of the same exact story, but from very different people with very different agendas and at very different times. And it is striking to me how generally consistent it is. Okay. And he says, instead of discussing it myself, I'm merely going to post some screenshots of what other people have posted on this topic and simply note that what all these people are saying very much echoes what I and others have also heard for years. Make of that what you will. This first screenshot, he says, is from Tanner Greer, someone that he knows directly and people understand to be an intelligent and serious person. He says that Greer's tweet was the straw that broke the camel's back on stuff like that for this man, Jonathan, who's writing the article. Okay. He also describes this Tanner Greer as someone being in a position to know these things. So in response to a random tweet on X, formerly Twitter, saying, hey guys, what would you all say is the worst kept secret of Silicon Valley? Greer responds, the Me Too that didn't happen there, but eventually will. It hasn't happened because the targets were young men in need of funding and the perps were gay men who had it. Didn't fit into the standard Me Too narrative, but eventually this shoe will drop and scandals will out. Continues. Linda Stevens says, and Thiel is a very sick sexual predator of young men. It's one of the secrets of Silicon Valley. He is loathsome. And you will remember that he was the key mentor to one J.D. Vance, who is said to be the vice president of the United States of America right now, but there's no real reason to believe that he actually is. Capital Hunters responded, is that reported anywhere? There is absolutely an enormous set of gay MAGA influencers, some closeted, some not. Trump was first pushed by Chris Barron's Geo Proud, and Peter's folks helped organize the Gays for Trump party at the 2016. I think he means in 2016. That was the nucleus for today's alt-right, or maybe he means at the 2016 inauguration or the campaign. I don't know when the Gays for Trump party happened. Okay. So there are gays out there supporting Trump. I wouldn't suggest that all of them are wrapped up in this in any way, but the Thiel influence is undeniable, and less important, his influence on politics than less important is his influence on politics than his influence on Silicon Valley culture, because the creation of all of these companies actually influences culture more than the politics do. And it turns out that they're actually just wielded, these weapons are wielded together in combined fashion. So they are wielded by the government with these corporations for the purpose of greater control over the people. Stevens responds, it was reported early on, but a lot has been scrubbed. In Silicon Valley, Thiel is the Larry Ellison of sexual creepiness. In that respect, he doesn't care if the boy he wants is gay. He uses his power and money to force compliance. It's about power as much as it is about sex. Now, I don't know these claims about Peter Thiel to be true. It just seems like it fits the exact same framing of the Hollywood Me Too incidents. And some of those I do know to be true from direct conversations with Harvey Weinstein victims, for instance. Okay. Like direct knowledge of these people listening to their stories. They have told me their interactions with Harvey Weinstein. Okay. And I've at least met, I think, Bob Weinstein. So some of this, and I don't suggest that Bob is the same as Harvey. They're not the same. Although wielding influence in one way or another, it doesn't have to be creepy sexual influence. There can be other favor trading going on besides that. And this is just something that happens in elite environments. Okay. I can't tell you what these people are guilty of in full in any way, or that they are definitely guilty of any of it. All I can say is I have some experience, in-depth conversations with people who were directly, who Harvey Weinstein came on to suggest that that actually is a pattern of behavior that is real for Weinstein. And I would suggest that it is not at all unusual to think that it would be true of gays in other high-profile positions, just like it's true of men in high-profile positions going after young women subordinates who want something from them, and then the sex becomes transactional. Okay. They get the sexual experience. The people in power get the sexual experience, the feeling of power, the feeling that they can make anyone do anything for them. And in exchange, they give that person some additional social credits and fiat tokens and allows them to live the life they always wanted to live, but couldn't live had they not made this sacrifice, this selling of their soul. Okay. Continuing on. And again, these are rumors, and he stated they are rumors, and I cannot prove any of this true, but these are rumors, and I've heard these rumors before. Thiel is the Epstein of Silicon Valley, this one says, Sakra on Twitter. He targets under 25-year-old males from Ivy Leagues and invites them to his estate in Napa, where they're drugged and raped by gays on video, used for sexual blackmail. And that scene was, by the way, presented in the Apprentice movie about Donald Trump, but obviously it wasn't Trump in that scene. It was Ray Cohn. Ray Cohn would host those parties, gather all the blackmail, and then use it against people. Okay? Or sorry, Roy Cohn. After being broken in, they're directed to start B2B SaaS companies. All right? That's a pretty serious claim. I am Ginger Trash on Twitter. Silicon Valley is broken into by being a bottom, by the way. You have to be under 23, impressionable, and be willing to get groomed. In return, you get money, your first B2B contract with a big name, and access to in-group. If you say no, you're ostracized. Some of your favorite people have literally groomed founders and done the Harvey Weinstein thing. You just don't know yet. Okay. And it goes on and on and on. And then he goes in to Thiel's relationship with a man named Jeff Thomas, who was a male model boyfriend of Peter Thiel's, who had this beautiful condo and all this. Apparently this man was talking to Ryan Grimm, who I think is at Politico or Axios, one of those outlets, a mainstream outlet, goes on MSNBC a lot. And so, take the claims for whatever they're worth. It's information among other information. News stories, do they indicate a certain reality? We can't know that to be true. But anyhow, this man, Jeff Thomas, was found 57 floors below his 57th floor apartment. His cause of death was a fall, apparently from his own apartment's balcony. Thomas was a gay 35-year-old male model who had recently relocated to Miami from Los Angeles, where he had been in an extended and at times stormy sexual relationship with Peter Thiel. He had also been talking to a reporter from The Intercept, Ryan Grimm, about his relationship with Thiel for a yet-to-be-published feature when he was suddenly found dead. It's worth it to look back at just what Grimm recounted of these conversations, as they present a rare and unfiltered look at Thiel's personal life and also serve as a kind of final testament for Thomas himself. And so he goes through those claims, talks about Peter Thiel with other young boys. And let's just close it down this way. Even if multiple victims suddenly came forward with some kind of irrefutable evidence that was able to convince a DA crazy enough to take on Thiel, his very expensive lawyers would lay complete siege to the case and begin the process of slowly picking it apart. In addition, immense pressure would be put on the accusers via Thiel's massive network of influence. One way or another, they would be crushed. And if that somehow didn't stop them, well, let's just say that struggles with mental health and addiction are increasingly common these days and frequently result in inexplicable Jeff Thomas-esque tragedies. And you can take the subtext of that as the point. Think of it this way. Thiel's business partner, Jeffrey Epstein, engaged in an insanely convoluted, reckless, and high-profile underage sex ring for years, and it still took ages for him to actually get collared for it. Thiel is orders of magnitude richer and more powerful than Epstein ever was, in addition to being significantly more intelligent and far more cautious. Thus, if there is any truth to the rumors, there is almost 0% chance he will ever face justice for it, at least not in a court of law, though we might be seeing an exposure operation happening in public right now. Of course, this could all be merely a series of vicious rumors and smears being spread by a band of demented activists and political operatives driven by an unquenchable resentment toward men greater than themselves and who seek to turn them into scapegoats for their own personal failures and for the unspeakable shame they feel when contemplating the inauthentic nature of their origin of their own desire, Well, okay, that is a possibility. Alternatively, Thiel's "they hate me because I'm beautiful" Gerardian squid ink defense could itself be complete bullshit. Merely the rhetorical camouflage used by a billionaire super predator enslaved by his own perverse desires and fantasies, a person who will do almost anything in order to further his goal of obtaining absolute power, not only over other people, but ultimately over life and death itself, or perhaps it is something else entirely. The choice is hard. Okay, so I think that was a really well put together article. I think that all of that is important stuff to know and consider. It could be, we don't become certain about it just because it fits what we imagine the world to be like, but it is information among other information that cannot simply be ignored. Okay, so that is significant influence from Peter Thiel. And when you understand that Silicon Valley works like Hollywood for that sexual favor trading, the corruption, and the compromise, then what do all the tech founders begin to look like? People who did the exact same thing. Now, understanding that they couldn't have gotten where they got on their own from their own work, then you would suspect that perhaps there is some incompetence in them. They are not actually these genius entrepreneurs, dropped out of college, became a genius entrepreneur. Now I'm a billionaire. I get to decide whether or not you're allowed to speak. That's where we are in our culture right now. Are they even competent? Could they have achieved what they achieved through meritocratic means? And the answer is almost definitely no, which is why they chose to go the sexual route, because they probably knew it too. Or they had to go that route so that they could be compromised, which would mean they could be controlled. Okay. If you're a guy who was gay for pay and then wants to live a life that is not that, you don't really want people finding out in the future that you were gay for pay, because it destroys your reputation and the life that you have built in denial of the really formative incident for your career. Okay. And so how much of tech is gay? We know they're all scientific materialists. We know they're nihilists. We know that they are technocrats looking to enhance their control over things and their wealth and their power and their status. And that's about all you need to know. Okay. I went off track in my mind just a bit there. I was going to say one other thing, and I realized as I was speaking that I was forgetting that thing. It's always annoying when that happens, but it always eventually does come back around. Anyhow, the tech oligarch control. Oh, this is what I was going to say. They also present themselves as libertarians. Is that because they care about the ultimate free markets? Or is it because they want to live in a society that morally and socially allows them to pursue all of the things that a moral society would not allow them to pursue? All of these things seem to align, which is why the relationship with the tech community is one of the most concerning relationships. It's the difference between hijacking the Great Reset or just bringing ourselves into the Great Reset. It's the difference between the resisting of that Great Reset and being dog walked into it. This is the distinction. These are the dividing lines. It's the neocon and the tech thing that are being split off right now, as we've talked about for basically the last month. And we can see that narrative continuing to enhance. And I don't think we're going to get to it, but the same thing's going on with the Israel situation and with the funding and arming of Ukraine, which Trump has intentionally made a controversy over the last few days. Now, I think we'll probably finish on the Epstein stuff. Let's just see how it goes. So anyhow, it's important to understand that the Jeffrey Epstein Black Book was sold by a butler. The butler did it to Gawker, and Gawker publicized it. Gawker also outed Peter Thiel as gay in 2007. Okay. And then Peter Thiel funded Hulk Hogan's lawsuit to destroy Gawker in 2016. Those are a series of important events that might have some relevance here. Okay. The Epstein Black Book was possessed by Gawker. Then Peter Thiel destroyed Gawker. Just saying. Peter Thiel ran, or not ran, but was part of, what was it, In-Q-Tel? The military industrial complex and intelligence community's investment arm to fund these Silicon Valley projects. One of which, of course, was Facebook, which began as LifeLog, and all of that information probably exists somewhere in a Palantir system now. Now, is all of this just a smoke screen or just a takedown attempt against the members of the PayPal mafia who are actually creating a real tech utopia that we will love and enjoy? Hey, maybe. Or maybe it's just a bunch of people who are willing to engage in whatever the regime wants from them in order to have the lifestyle that they desire in this here material world. And as a result of their non-Christian and Judeo-Christian beliefs, right? The focus on the world, the worldly and the practical, rather than the moral and the godly. And that was one of the things that I spent significant time on in that Peter Thiel article. I would suggest taking a look at it. So on Sunday evening, we got this supposedly from the Department of Justice and the FBI. Okay. Now, the first problem is if you go down to the end of the document, here it is, the end of this letter, you will see conspicuously that there is no signature. There's no indication of an individual taking responsibility for the production and dissemination of this letter. But it reads, as part of our commitment to transparency, the Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation have conducted an exhaustive review of investigative holdings relating to Jeffrey Epstein. To ensure that the review was thorough, the FBI conducted digital searches of its databases, hard drives, and network drives, as well as physical searches of squad areas, locked cabinets, desks, closets, and other areas where responsive material may have been stored. These searches covered a significant amount of material, including more than 300 gigabytes of data and physical evidence. The files relating to Epstein include a large volume of images of Epstein, images and videos of victims who are either minors or appear to be minors, and over 10,000 downloaded videos and images of illegal child sex abuse material and other pornography. teams of agents, analysts, attorneys, and privacy and civil liberties experts combed through the digital and documentary evidence with the aim of providing as much information as possible to the public while simultaneously protecting victims. Much of the material is subject to court-ordered sealing. Only a fraction of this material would have been aired publicly had Epstein gone to trial, as the seal served only to protect victims and did not expose any additional third parties to allegations of illegal wrongdoing. Through this review, we found no basis to revisit the disclosure of those materials and will not permit the release of child pornography. And that, of course, is appropriate. The systematic review revealed no incriminating client list. There was also no credible evidence found that Epstein blackmailed prominent individuals as part of his actions. We did not uncover evidence that could predicate an investigation against uncharged third parties. Okay. Now, the Epstein Black Book is assumed to be a client list. Tons of celebrities and prominent figures. Everyone assumes them to be clients of Jeffrey Epstein and therefore pedophiles. Is that true? Okay. It might be true. I'm not denying that it is true, but could that black book be something else? Could it be intelligence contacts, a list of intelligence assets who are controlled? Could be. There's a number of things that it could be. So right there, we have to understand that because we are not certain about the provenance, about the reality, and about the purpose of this black book, we cannot be certain that it is indeed a client list. It might be, it might not be. So we don't know whether or not they're telling us something true here. And it's important to remember that we don't have direct evidence. We can't argue on first principles and sound logic that that black book is the client list. So what does it mean if we are calling people pedophiles who are not pedophiles? Well, we can chalk it up to being appropriately concerned about the problem of elite pedophiles, of course, but I think it's probably not a good thing to go around calling people pedophiles if they're not pedophiles. And some of the focus on this is specifically because so many people are famous, are powerful, are prominent figures. Okay. And so that is part of our idol worship and the idea that there are people who exist on higher planes than we do, and we want to simultaneously worship them as better than us, but also bring them down to our level. And there's a lot of that going on in the truth community broadly. And I think everybody's probably witnessed it, if not taken part in it. Okay. There is a thing about people wanting to take down the rich, the powerful, the prominent, the celebrities, etc. And so a lot of this is based on that. And that part alone is unfortunate. Let's continue. Consistent with prior disclosures, this review confirmed that Epstein harmed over 1,000 victims. Each suffered unique trauma. Sensitive information relating to these victims is intertwined throughout the materials. This includes specific details such as victim names and likenesses, physical descriptions, places of birth, associates, and employment history. One of our highest priorities is combating child exploitation and bringing justice to victims. Perpetuating unfounded theories about Epstein serves neither of those ends. To that end, while we have labored to provide the public with maximum information regarding Epstein and ensured examination of any evidence in the government's possession, it is the determination of the Department of Justice and the FBI that no further disclosure would be appropriate or warranted. After a thorough investigation, FBI investigators concluded that Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide in his cell at the Metropolitan Correctional Facility or Center in New York City on August 10th, 2019. This conclusion is consistent with previous findings, including the August 19th, 2019 autopsy findings of the New York City Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, the November 2019 position of the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, in connection with the investigation of federal correctional officers responsible for guarding Epstein, and the June 2023 conclusions of DOJ's Office of the Inspector General. The conclusion that Epstein died by suicide is further supported by video footage from the common area of the special housing unit where Epstein was housed at the time of his death. As DOJ Inspector General explained in 2023, anyone entering or attempting to enter the tier where Epstein's cell was located from the SHU common area would have been captured by this footage. The FBI's independent review of this footage confirmed that from the time Epstein was locked in his cell around 10:40 p.m. on August 9th, 2019, until around 6:30 a.m. the next morning, nobody entered any of the tiers in the SHU. During this review, the FBI enhanced the relevant footage by increasing its contrast, balancing the color, and improving its sharpness for greater clarity and viewability. The full, raw, and enhanced videos are available at the following links. And then they released an 11-hour security video of Epstein's cell that is said to cover that critical period and thereby prove, though it does not prove, that Epstein was not murdered. No one came into his cell. Okay. It is an indirect, multi-level indirect proof. Okay. We have to believe the video is real video. We have to believe that the video makes it impossible for someone else to have been in there or for him to have been murdered in other means and then staged as a suicide. Okay. Do we know that to be true? No, we can't know any of those things to be true, but we can allow for the possibility that it's true. Really highly doubtful, but the whole thing is highly doubtful. And that's, again, another one of the important parts of this story. I've been talking for weeks, not months, that the Epstein thing seems like it's building into a major rug. And maybe this is just a rug along the road to a final disclosure. That's entirely possible. Okay. But we have to be very clear that we know about this black book and we know about court filings. We have read those court filings. We know that there were arrests and convictions of Epstein and of Ghislaine Maxwell, who is said to be his co-conspirator in this blackmail ring based on compromising situations created between powerful, prominent, popular people and underage girls. And, as far as we know, there could be more. In addition to that, court filings are not statements of objective fact, okay? And testimony from supposed victims are not statements of objective fact. They are claims from people who claim to be victims, okay? Just like I know that there were claims about Harvey Weinstein's misdeeds, I also knew directly that some of the claims in the Me Too era were not actually true, okay? And that there are multiple other levels to many of those claims, I guess, is important to add on. So claims can be made. People can claim victimhood. I remember there was one, I think his name, the comedian Aziz Ansari, okay? There was a Me Too claim made about him that was clearly, that he was clearly engaged in no wrongdoing if you allow for casual sexual encounters, all right? You might say that that is wrong. I might agree with you about that. But in terms of something legally actionable or Me Too oriented, like he was attempting to take advantage of this woman in some way, none of those things were present in the story. So a person can claim victimhood and not be an actual victim. And when you're talking about high profile situations where political situations, where money, whatever else are involved, it's entirely possible to go victim shopping and then bring that victim's claims into the courts. And because the claims are of a certain variety, they cannot be disbelieved by anybody, even though there's no reason to actually believe them. Okay. We wouldn't want to be in the position of having denied that someone was victimized in the way people are said to be victimized by Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and their clients. So instead, we don't question those beliefs. We just allow for them, even though they are not founded on direct evidence, first principles, or sound logic. They're only claims made in lawsuits. And if you take away the salaciousness of these claims and look at any of the lawfare that has been waged in the last 10 years, are all the claims made in those court cases true? Of course not. Most of them are unbelievable. Should we then believe claims made in other court cases? I would suggest no. The fact that there was a Netflix documentary about the Epstein thing, well, that's going to make it seem like a rug. Okay, there's a lot of indicators that something is wrong in this story. All right. And because we don't have direct evidence, first principles, or sound logic to make up the mainstream view about Jeffrey Epstein, we're left in a bit of a bind when something like this happens. There's certainly tons of smoke there. All right. There might be something to that smoke. I'm not denying the possibility. It also might be the case that it's all been a massive hoodwinking that people have gone hook, line, and sinker for. Okay. This is being pushed by some of the biggest names out there. Dan Bongino, who's the deputy to Kash Patel at the FBI. He's having to come out and say now that, you know, he used to want the Epstein list, and it just turns out there isn't one. Well, I got into the job and I found out that none of the stuff I believed was actually true. Tucker Carlson's pushed it for a long time. Elon Musk has been pushing it. He said that Donald Trump was in the Epstein files in the first round of the Trump-Musk celebrity breakup story. Now he's saying Steve Bannon is in the Epstein files. Really? Steve Bannon. Thoroughly unbelievable. Okay. But there have been lots of claims made about the Epstein files, and it's possible that people have gone in too hard on this story. I hope that's not the case, because the crimes, to the extent that they're real, and they are definitely real outside of the Epstein story, I don't think anybody's denying that. The crimes then have to, the victims need accountability for what they were put through. And we want to be able to see that process through to the end. Okay. Demanding truth. Are we able to demand truth? Maybe the takeaway is we don't actually have the ability to demand truth like that. Or maybe there's something else going on. And it's entirely possible, by the way, that the letter is put out to create this conversation, and that behind that, there are mountains of evidence about all of those people. There's the list, there's all of it. And that evidence has been moved from the Department of Justice that shouldn't constitutionally exist, the federal police force that shouldn't constitutionally exist. Maybe all the evidence has been taken away from them and given to a body that can be trusted, the military. Is that possible? Yeah, it's possible. Do I know that's happening? No, I can't possibly know that. Okay. Let's get to some of the coverage. A lot of people speculated that the letter was not authentic because there was no signature. And the no signature thing is an indication that something is a little off. No doubt about it. Ash in America brought this to my attention the other day. I hadn't even looked into the letter or read the letter. And she was like, hey, this letter might be fake. There's no signature here. Good point, Ash. Let's remember other signature-free documents. One of them was Biden announcing that he was stepping down from his role as candidate in the fake campaign last year. No signature. Then Biden came out later and confirmed, but something was still way off with that whole story on many, many levels. Okay. A lot of the truth community just accepted that the letter was a fake or a forgery or not real in some respects, maybe because they didn't want to deal with what it might mean if it was real. All right. What are you going to do? Get mad at Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, even after you said to trust Trump in their selection? Last year, when the fantasy team was being drafted and the TV characters were being selected, the entire cast of Fox News given jobs in the Trump administration, you can't very well have said, trust Trump, these are all the best people last year, and now turn against them for the Epstein thing, right? I mean, Kash Patel is some kind of hero of the truth community. You can't just throw him overboard, can you? So then we end up in a cope spiral from the people who are supposed to be operating from direct evidence, first principles, and sound logic. People who are ostensibly, at least, focused on the truth, which is strange because a number of them are pathological liars. Let's get to Caroline Leavitt, who was asked about the Epstein letter in a press conference in the White House press briefing room yesterday.
Caroline, the DOJ and FBI have now concluded there was no Jeffrey Epstein client list. What do you tell MAGA supporters who say they want anyone involved in Jeffrey Epstein's alleged crimes to be held accountable?
This administration wants anyone who has ever committed a crime to be held accountable, and I would argue this administration has done more to lock up bad guys than certainly the previous administration. And the Trump administration is committed to truth and to transparency. That's why the Attorney General and the FBI Director pledged at the President's direction to do an exhaustive review of all of the files related to Jeffrey Epstein's crimes and his death. And they put out a memo in conclusion of that review. There was material they did not release because, frankly, it was incredibly graphic and it contained child pornography, which is not something that's appropriate for public consumption. But they committed to an exhaustive investigation. That's what they did, and they provided the results of that. That's transparency.
Follow up on that,
Sure.
Caroline. Okay, so the FBI looks at the circumstances surrounding the death of Jeffrey Epstein. According to the report, this systematic review revealed no incriminating client list. So what happened to the Epstein client list that the Attorney General said she had on her desk?
Well, I think if you go back and look at what the Attorney General said in that interview, which was on your network on Fox News.
I've got the quote.
Go ahead.
John Roberts said, DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients. Will that really happen? And she said, it's sitting on my desk right now to review.
Yes, she was saying the entirety of all of the paperwork, all of the paper in relation to Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. That's what the Attorney General was referring to, and I'll let her speak for that. But again, when it comes to the FBI and the Department of Justice, they are more than committed to ensuring that bad people are put behind bars. They have an operation going on right now called Summer Heat, which has our murder rate trending in the lowest direction in United States history. Their emphasis on violent crime and locking up violent criminals has led to the arrest of 14,000 violent criminals. That's a 62% increase from the same time period last year. So this Attorney General and the FBI Director are committed to putting bad people behind bars where they belong. They promised an exhaustive review. That's what they did. For any further details, I would refer you to the Department of Justice.
Okay, so at that point, there was at least an additional reason to assume that the letter is true and authentic. Okay. Caroline Leavitt is the spokesperson for the Donald Trump administration, who nonetheless isn't Donald Trump, who is his own spokesperson, but she's the official voice of the administration. And she is going along with this letter and indicating its realness. So we have that piece. Here is Pam Bondi today. Donald Trump had a cabinet meeting and Bondi addressed some of this. Here's the first clip.
Like a desecration, but you go ahead.
Sure. First, to back up on that, in February, I did an interview on Fox, and it's been getting a lot of attention because I said, I was asked a question about the client list, and my response was, it's sitting on my desk to be reviewed, meaning the file, along with the JFK, MLK files as well. That's what I meant by that.
And let's just continue on here.
Sure. First, to back up on that, in February, I did an interview on Fox, and it's been getting a lot.
Some of this is, I thought that would be cut better than that, but let's just skip a couple seconds ahead and then catch up with her.
It's sitting on my desk to be reviewed, meaning the file, along with the JFK, MLK files as well. That's what I meant by that. Also, to the tens of thousands of video, they turned out to be child porn downloaded by that disgusting Jeffrey Epstein. Child porn is what they were. Never going to be released, never going to see the light of day. To him being an agent, I have no knowledge about that. We can get back to you on that. And the minute missing from the video, we released the video showing definitively the video was not conclusive, but the evidence prior to it was showing he committed suicide. And what was on that, there was a minute that was off the counter. And what we learned from Bureau of Prisons was every night, they redo that video. It's old, from like 1999. So every night the video is reset, and every night should have the same minute missing. So we're looking for that video to release that as well, showing that a minute is missing every night. And that's it on Epstein.
That's it on Epstein. Every night, a minute of the security footage goes missing. So there's no way that anyone could have run into the cell and put Jeffrey Epstein up by a bed sheet. I think that's what it was. In that minute, we're supposed to believe, even if the video is real, even if there's no sign of anybody entering the cell on the video. Well, if the system's been in place for 25 years or more, and everybody knows that the cameras go off for a minute every night, well, then that would be the time to do something. I think that's even been used as a gimmick in movies. So the explanation only opens up more questions, as we talked about before. Let's keep going. This is Donald Trump in his response.
Your memo and release yesterday on Jeffrey Epstein, it left some lingering mysteries. One of the biggest ones is whether he ever worked for an American or foreign intelligence agency. The former Labor Secretary, who was Miami U.S. Attorney Alex Costa, he allegedly said that he did work for an intelligence agency. So could you resolve whether or not he did? And also, could you say why there was a minute missing from the jailhouse tape on the night of the
Yeah, sure.
Hey, Pam, could I just interrupt for 1 second? Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep? That is unbelievable. Do you want to waste the time, and do you feel like answering?
I don't mind answering.
I mean, I can't believe you're asking a question on Epstein at a time like this, where we're having some of the greatest success and also tragedy with what happened in Texas. It just seems like a desecration, but you go ahead.
So then Bondi's comments begin, but that's the Trump position on it. Why is anyone talking about this? Now, that has upset a lot of people, and maybe rightfully so. What is the effect of that going to be? Again, more questions will definitely be asked. This is The Guardian. Today, top House Democrats demand release of Epstein files that mention Trump. Okay, so the story that emerged after this in some sections of the normie sphere, people who still think Donald Trump is just evil somehow, they decided that Trump held these files back and had his administration hold these files back because he is implicated and doesn't want to allow that. He is just as corrupted as all the other people named in the Epstein files, and that is why he's not letting the files out. Now, none of us believe that. I don't think there's any reason to believe that, but to the extent that he might be mentioned in the files, knowing that they're not coming out, it's easy to make political hay by demanding that they be put out. The House Judiciary's ranking member, Jamie Raskin, together with 15 other Democrats, sent a 6-page letter to the U.S. Attorney General, Pam Bondi, accusing her of withholding some Epstein files to protect the president from any damaging disclosures. They also called for the Justice Department to make public the second volume of former special counsel Jack Smith's report into Trump's alleged mishandling of classified documents, arguing that Bondi has a track record of using the Justice Department to protect the president. And these are people who supported a Justice Department as it pursued the president for made-up crimes under made-up laws. Some of those were just made-up laws. In addition to making up the crime, the novel legal theory of Alvin Bragg, you might remember, in New York, and then Jack Smith went after a couple of things that turned out he couldn't charge anybody for. So Raskin is prodding the Democrat establishment to push for the release of the Epstein files. And Elon Musk is playing good cop to Trump's bad cop. He said this afternoon, how can people be expected to have faith in Trump if he won't release the Epstein files? It's going to create more questions. More people are going to be asking about that. Will Trump have to then release more? Maybe. Maybe there isn't more. We assume that there is more. Will Trump then release it? Perhaps. Will the attention be maximized at the point at which Trump releases it? Perhaps. Okay. So what else could be going on here, though? Let's consider the Epstein files and the ultimate truth of the Epstein scenario as one of the biggest trump cards that could possibly be played, right? If all of Trump's enemies were implicated in the Epstein files, it would be very destructive of them to have the Epstein files released. Just like it would be destructive if the truth about election fraud were to come out, or the truth about a number of other things were to come out and be understood by the public. All these things would be deleterious to the regime and the uniparty, the establishment as it exists, and their ability to move forward. So we are dealing with world historic power against us, against the people, against Donald Trump. Okay. And we have this series of trump cards that can destroy them at any moment. Do we just destroy them and then allow for the fallout? Or do we slow play this so that everybody on our side has a full and complete understanding of what the enemy is, who the enemy is, and how they operate? Okay. And over time, you just allow that to keep rolling out into the public, being further and further understood to the point where the whole thing becomes visible. And we know for generations what the truth about all this is, and everyone understands it. It's not the sort of thing that some fake news on a website or some fake news in a history book can refute. It's just something that everyone knows. It seems like that's the approach that's being taken, and it's playing out over time. So if you understand Donald Trump as the avatar of this thing, but let's just use Trump for now, okay? If you understand he's got all these trump cards that he can play at any moment and you don't see him playing them, what else is going on? Are concessions being extracted? Did the timing of the Epstein letter have something to do with Benjamin Netanyahu coming over here for a meeting with Trump? Who knows if there was an info op set to run on Monday to diminish Bibi's visit in the quest for peace. And by the way, apparently Bibi said that Trump should be awarded a Nobel Peace Prize. Was there a counter information op set up to run that was then short-circuited by the release of that letter on Sunday night? Potentially, I don't know. Just saying it's a possibility. But regardless, if you got all these trump cards, then you can wait. You can be patient. You can extract concessions over time because the enemy is never going to give up. And their goal is to retain whatever power and control, whatever of their agenda and their apparatus that they built out over all this time. They want to be able to maintain that to maximum effect. Okay. That's the goal at this point. If the other party has all the leverage or the majority of the leverage, you know you're going to have to keep backpedaling at whatever pace they choose. But you're never just going to retreat all the way, just accept it as a done deal and be like, all right, fine, you can destroy us, right? So you'd keep negotiating backwards without ever actually removing the trump card from play. So the trump card's still there, but the problem for the regime is growing all the while, okay? The Epstein problem did not go away on Sunday night. If anything, it is more of a problem now. More of the public wants to know why we're being deceived, how we could be deceived about something this important. It's possible that we're just not being deceived, and then people are going to have to readjust their priors. But I would agree with those people who think that the amount of smoke there indicates there's probably a fire somewhere. Okay. So Trump is always in mid-negotiation. And then it becomes a moral argument as to whether or not something is happening in the background that is taking care of the problem in a real way so that the problem is actually in reality gone and mitigated. And we're going to find out about it later. If something like that is going on, then this information process is actually not harmful or disrespectful to the victims. In fact, it is going to create a more holistic solution than you could have achieved otherwise. And so there are possibilities in all of this that make total sense, that don't refute the claims, and that don't make Trump the bad guy here. And I don't believe that he is the bad guy. Holding on to those Trump cards while the enemy keeps yielding concessions and you never actually have to play your Trump cards, that's pretty powerful art of war business. And I would suggest that that might be exactly what's going on here. Two more quick things, and then we will get out of here. All right. Just making sure that I have not missed anything here in the chat. We do have one more, Rumble ad to get to. So let's just knock that out real quick. This ad is for Rumble Premium. And on Friday, if you would like to watch the subscriber stream on Rumble and participate in the Rumble chat, rather than watching and participating over on Substack, you will need Rumble Premium. And Rumble Premium is important to Rumble as a company because it is one of their sources of revenue through which they run their operations and through which they end up monetizing the platform for the content creators. When they started back in 2013, they built the platform for the small creator and were anti-censorship the entire time. And then we hit 2020 and everybody was censored for COVID, for election stuff, for whatever political issue the regime found inconvenient. But Rumble never fell to that censorship. And they have hosted my show in its audio form and now its video form without any interference for years. So Rumble did not bow to the pressure to censor. They held the line. They're attacked daily for giving us a voice to talk to you. They're attacked in corporate media. They're attacked by governments like France, and they're attacked by brand advertisers who refuse to work with them. Corporate America is fighting to remove speech. Rumble is fighting to keep it. Rumble won't survive on brand advertisers. They don't get much of it. Watching our show on Rumble is the most, our shows, I should say, on Rumble is the most they can ask from you. But if you really believe in this fight and you have the means, one major way you can help Rumble survive is by joining Rumble Premium. Join the community that believes in the First Amendment and believes in our human right to free speech. Rumble is offering $10 off with the promo code STUDIO when you purchase an annual subscription. Go to rumble.com/premium and use the promo code STUDIO. If you have the means and believe in the cause, now's the time to join Rumble Premium. If you don't have the means, we're just happy you watch this show. You're on Rumble. Okay. So 2 more quick things, and then we will be out of here for the day. This is Brian Stelter on X, formerly Twitter. Brian Stelter, who slipped into a more background role for a period, and now he is charging back. Trump has all but confirmed a so-called side deal with the would-be future owners of Paramount. Charlie Gasparino was the first to report on this last week, asserting that on top of the publicly announced $16 million payment to settle Trump's legally dubious 60 Minutes lawsuit, David Ellison has secretly agreed to run PSAs for Trump-aligned causes. Paramount denied any knowledge, but that was the point. The company wouldn't know. Now, David Ellison is Larry Ellison's son. And he has a sister, I think her name is Megan Ellison, who is also a major Hollywood producer. David Ellison runs Skydance, and Skydance does a pretty good job of working in an anti-woke direction. Now, they are doing this merge with CBS and Paramount. And this has become a controversial issue because Trump has sued 60 Minutes over the edited interview of Kamala Harris. They've reached this settlement, $60 million to settle the suit, and then $16 million worth of public service announcements for pro-America messaging. On Thursday night, Trump told the press pool, we did a deal for about 16 million plus 16 million, or maybe more than that in advertising. It's like 32 to maybe 35 million. Trump also praised his friend, Larry Ellison. I think he's going to run CBS really well, and I think he's making a good deal to buy it. I think he's great. Before getting around to David, he's got a son who's a fantastic young man too. All of this will, of course, escalate concerns. This is Stelter speaking. Escalate concerns about the Ellisons inside CBS News. And who gives a shit about the opinion inside CBS News? But let's think about what else is going on here, okay? So we have CBS, Paramount, Skydance as one entity. We have TikTok in whatever new form it takes in 2 months with their data stored under Larry Ellison at Oracle, and those things will be combined. Jeff Yass, who had $20 billion in TikTok, also is said to have money in DJT. DJT has Truth Social, Rumble Cloud. Okay. So you have different aspects of the online media environment covered under these different entities. Some of those are extremely popular entities, like TikTok is the biggest social media app. CBS and Paramount and Skydance are going to be a massive film and TV production studio. And then you've got Truth Social and Rumble Cloud, which are kind of seen as second tier options compared to the legacy options. If all of these things combined, and who knows if Twitter's involved or whatever else, if all of these things are combined, then you have an enormously powerful media apparatus. And you have to wonder if those will be combined under DJT. And at that point, then everyone would be concerned that the president is controlling all this media. But how would we do a nationalization of all these regime assets and companies, organizations, the entire apparatus, without becoming the communist state we fear? I wonder if it's being done in stepwise process through drainage and the rest of it, and will end up under Donald Trump somehow. Donald Trump could then just gift that to the people of the nation, and we would be living in a whole new world, okay? If the media apparatus was taken away from these corporations, from regime interests, and given back in some controlling sense to the people, with there still being people at these companies running them with profit-based incentives. Obviously, I don't know that that model is what we're going to see, but it seems like a possibility that we might embrace at some point. And, you know, this sort of thing has been done before. The nationalization of industries is not a desirable thing in any way, it's certainly not a long-term solution. It might be required in a short-term solution to remove bad actors, although I'm not sold on that view either. There's just a lot of things happening around the same time, and we can see a confluence of events that indicates a connection between them and maybe potential direction on where this is all going. So with that, I'm going to check the chat one last time. I hope everyone enjoyed themselves. Please share the video. If you liked something you saw and you're able to find where it is and you want to clip it and direct it to me on social media, I will use and repost that. And thank you for your help in spreading the word. And otherwise, I will be back on Friday for the subscriber stream at the same reasonable time on the same reasonable podcast network. I don't have a network. Masks and lockdowns don't work. They lied to you about a pandemic. And Joe Biden was never president.
Well,
what?
You know who I am, don't you? Well, you ain't Fiona Apple, and if you ain't Fiona Apple, I don't give a rat's ass.
What's wrong with being an angry prophet denouncing the hypocrisies of our times? What do you think, Max?
Do you want to be an angry prophet denouncing the hypocrisies of our times?
Yeah, I think I'd like to be an angry prophet denouncing the hypocrisies of our times.
It's not true. It's more true than I would perhaps prefer.
Let you down. We do a little trolling. It's called We Do a Little Trolling. What?
In my mind, that's the end game.
If you're listening for free and would like to support the show, the best way to do that is by signing up for a paid subscription at imyourmoderator.substack.com. You can find the info stream over on Telegram at t.me/veryreasonable. The merch site is cancelcouture.com, and for all my other links, you can visit linktree.com/imyourmoderator. And I'll see you soon, down on the range.